Good evening, dreamers, and welcome to a very special night on Dark Sleep Radio. Tonight isn't just another episode, it's one of those rare stories that stays with you long after the lights go out. For those who are new, this is the place where we share real encounters with beings from beyond the skies, strange happenings at the edge of belief, and mysteries told softly enough to guide you into sleep. But tonight, I want you especially comfortable. Dim the lights, take a deep breath, and let the quiet of the night wrap around you, because we're stepping into something unusual. Mark will be joining us with a story that begins with a simple fishing trip under the stars and ends with a brush against the unknown and encounter with something alien out there on the water in the dead of night. So wherever you're listening from, whether it's your bed, your couch, or maybe even your own midnight campsite, settle in. Relax, and let's begin this journey together.
Hey everyone, this is Mark. First off, I just want to say thanks for letting me be part of this special episode of Dark Sleep Radio. I know most of us tune in to unwind, to drift off while hearing about the mysteries above, and tonight I've got one of my own to share. This story isn't second-hand, it happened to me. What started as a simple night of fishing under the stars turned into something I never expected. The water was calm, the air was still, and then the sky wasn't empty anymore. So, if you're ready, let me take you back to that night on the lake, where my quiet fishing trip became an encounter I'll never forget. Night fishing has been my passion for years. The lake at midnight holds a special tranquility, especially when you're completely alone. 2 summers back, everything changed during what seemed like an ordinary late-night fishing trip. The water was perfectly still. My lantern glowed softly, and a quiet radio played in the background. Frogs croaked their usual evening song, and an owl hooted occasionally. The full moon painted silver streaks across the dark surface, and a crisp coolness hung in the air. I was the only boat out there, enjoying some extra time after a good catch. Something felt different that night. At first, it was subtle, a strange pressure at the edges of my awareness. I tried dismissing it as fatigue, but then a sound caught my attention. It wasn't like anything I'd heard before. Not quite an engine, not quite a boat. Just a soft, persistent hum that seemed to vibrate through water and air itself. Fog began creeping from the shoreline, forming thick tendrils around my boat. I scanned the area, seeing nothing unusual. The moonlight provided enough visibility, but something felt off. The mysterious hum grew louder, more constant. Then I saw them, small, round lights floating directly on the water's surface. They appeared unexplainable, defying any rational description, just hanging there, suspended impossibly against the dark water. This wasn't the calm lake night I knew. Something beyond ordinary was happening. I was out fishing when I first noticed them. At first, I thought they might be reflections or other fishermen with strange lights. But as I stared harder, I realized these weren't normal lights. They were hovering just above the water, moving in a perfect circle around my boat. They didn't look like fireflies. These lights were too steady, too intentional. They moved with a precision that felt controlled, like anything natural. The number grew. 3, then 4, then 5 orbs floating in a small arc around me, just above the water's surface. Silent, glowing a soft blue that cut through the mist. My heart raced. I tried convincing myself they were some kind of bioluminescent algae, but I knew deep down that wasn't true. These things were deliberate. When I tried my flashlight, it did nothing. The beam wouldn't cut through the fog, almost as if the light wasn't permitted to reach them. They weren't just floating. They were studying something, mapping something far beyond my understanding. The way they rotated around me felt calculated. One orb dipped lower, close enough that I could feel the air shift. Not touching me, but creating a strange pressure, like the atmosphere was changing. Suddenly, it darted back up. The air felt thicker. A low hum grew louder, suggesting something deep beneath the water had awakened, something that had been there long before I arrived. I wasn't proud of how scared I was, but I wasn't going to sit there and wait to find out more. I started pulling in my fishing line, trying to act normal, trying to ignore the fear building inside me. My only thought was to get my gear in, turn the boat around and leave. But the orbs were faster than I could have imagined. As I paddled across the lake, The night was thick with fog. Suddenly, lights began to move around my boat. These weren't ordinary lights. They pulsed with a rhythmic, almost alive quality that made the hair on my neck stand up. More like tiny hovering probes than simple illumination. They seemed intelligent and deliberate. Beneath the moonlight, something massive was stirring just under the water's surface. A shadowy outline undulated and shifted, barely visible. The orbs reacted to this unseen presence, darting and circling, as if in communication. They studied the movement below with an eerie precision, moving back and forth in a calculated dance. Panic seized me. Without thinking, I grabbed my paddle and started pushing forward, hands trembling. The orbs followed, their lights bobbing and shifting in silent surveillance. I was certain they would never leave. But then, as suddenly as they appeared, they began to pull away. One by one, they drifted back into the fog, the humming sound fading until the night was quiet again. My boat felt lighter, but a deep unease remained. Something had been set in motion, something beyond my comprehension. I didn't look back, paddling urgently towards the shore, desperate to escape. The next day, I returned to the spot. Everything was normal. Calm water, still air, as if nothing had happened. But I knew what I'd seen. These weren't ordinary phenomena. They were something else entirely, something not of this world. Now, every time I visit the lake, I can't shake the feeling that they're still out there, watching, waiting. I don't fish at night anymore, and I've never told anyone about what I experienced. Some things are better left unspoken. I've been haunted by this experience for years, and most people wouldn't believe me if I told them. But I know what I saw in Antarctica, deep beneath the ice. I was part of a research team studying climate patterns, doing routine work like collecting ice core samples and measuring atmospheric gases. Our job was important, if not particularly thrilling. We were stationed at an isolated research station with 9 other colleagues, spending 6 months in the landscape of endless white and profound silence. Everything changed during a survey, about 20 kilometers from our main station. Our radar detected something unusual buried 300 meters deep, an anomaly with an unnaturally symmetrical shape. What started as a routine investigation quickly became something extraordinary. Why? 4 of us decided to drill and explore. As we went deeper, we realized this wasn't a natural formation. The radar revealed sharp angles and edges that couldn't have occurred naturally. After 4 days of drilling, we broke through into a hollow space that defied explanation. The space was unlike anything we'd encountered. The walls were smooth, almost polished, with a strange metallic quality that was colder than the surrounding ice. The air was thin but breathable. At the center was a structure resembling a small aircraft hangar, covered in bizarre glowing symbols that pulsed like a heartbeat. There were no visible seams or construction methods, nothing to explain how this structure existed beneath centuries of ice. Something was watching us, studying the lake, and we were just a tiny part of its observation. Years later, I still can't shake the memory of what we discovered that day. Something was out there in the dark water, something ancient and incomprehensible. A massive teardrop-shaped structure stood before us, about the size of a bus. Its metallic surface gleamed like the chamber walls, but something felt different. This wasn't just an object, it was alive. Not with movement exactly, but with an energy that vibrated through our bones, a deep, resonant hum that seemed to penetrate our very core. We approached cautiously, nobody wanting to disturb something that had been buried for an unknown length of time. Our initial work was methodical. We photographed the structure, collected ice samples, and documented every detail. Yet, with each passing hour, a growing uneasiness settled over me. The hum wasn't just a sound anymore. It was inside my head, impossible to ignore. When we reported our findings, the research organization's leadership responded quickly. They sent instructions to investigate further, providing minimal details but clear direction. Within a week, a team of engineers arrived with specialized equipment. That's when everything changed. The engineers brought a high-powered laser cutting tool to breach the vessel's hull. As soon as they began, the hum intensified dramatically. It transformed from a sound into a violent vibration that shook the entire chamber. The symbols on the wall started shifting and rearranging. seeming to react to our actions. A crushing pressure built in my chest. The air felt like it was being sucked away. Suddenly, the vessel split open of its own accord, a seam appearing along its side, revealing its contents. Inside were pods, about a dozen, arranged in a perfect circle. Each was filled with clear liquid, and suspended within were beings unlike anything human. Tall, with elongated limbs and smooth, pale skin, their large, dark eyes and sharp, almost insect-like features were both fascinating and unsettling. They appeared preserved, as if in a deep sleep. The engineers continued their work, taking samples and analyzing the liquid, seemingly oblivious to the growing tension. With each disturbance, the hum grew louder, more intense. By the second day, it was deafening, and the chamber's atmosphere felt electrically charged. On the third day, everything changed. The beings awakened. I was at the main station when the panicked radio call came in from the team on site. The signal cut out before they could explain, leaving us with only static. A group of us suited up and drove out to the site. But the chamber was empty when we arrived. The vessel remained, its pods open, and both the beings and engineers had vanished. No signs of struggle marked the scene. No blood, no footprints in the snow. We didn't stay long. The hum grew louder, almost unbearable, and the wall symbols flashed in dizzying patterns that made my head ache. We gathered what we could and left. In the weeks that followed, strange occurrences became our new normal. Mysterious lights danced across the sky. Shadows moved where nothing should have been. Equipment failed constantly. Local wildlife, seals and penguins, disappeared without a trace. Some team members claimed to hear whispers carried on the wind, though I never did. What haunted me was something more subtle. The persistent sensation of being watched, even in complete solitude. The organization eventually shut down the station. They called it a logistical decision, but we all understood the unspoken truth. Whatever we had discovered was never meant to be found. I left Antarctica, unable to bear the fresh, raw memories. Even now, halfway across the world, I sometimes feel that distant hum, faint, but waiting. My night shift started like any other. As a security guard at a small office complex on the town's edge, my job was straightforward: walk the property and monitor CCTV cameras. The building was modest: 3 floors, a parking lot, and a few storage sheds out back. Most nights passed uneventfully, filled with old magazines and tired eyes fixed on monitors. But that night was different. Around 2:15 a.m., while sipping stale coffee in the control room, something caught my attention on camera 8, which covered the rear lot by the sheds, an area typically quiet and unused. At first, I thought it was a technical glitch. A faint shimmer appeared near one of the sheds, resembling a heat wave or a water-like ripple. The night was still, yet something caught my eye on the screen. At first, I couldn't make sense of what I was seeing. The shape moved differently, tall and narrow, constantly shifting like it couldn't settle on a form. Almost like it was breathing, the shimmer pulsed faintly. I switched the camera settings, cycling through night vision, infrared, and ultraviolet. Night vision showed no... Infrared was blank, as if the thing gave off no heat. But ultraviolet revealed something extraordinary. Suddenly, a figure emerged, tall and thin, with a body that looked almost liquid. Its skin shimmered in colors like oil on water, with no face, just a smooth, reflective surface where a head should be. The arms were long and jointed at impossible angles, bending in ways that defied logic. Frozen, I watched as it stood near the shed, slowly moving its head as if surveying the area. Then it crouched, pressing what seemed like a hand against the ground. Motionless, it appeared to be studying something. My mind raced. Should I call the police? They'd never believe me. A shape-shifting, shimmering entity in the parking lot would sound crazy. Going out there myself seemed impossible. My instinct screamed to stay put, so I watched. The figure remained by the shed for minutes before standing and moving with an unnatural grace. It floated just above the ground, moving deliberately. Sometimes it would stop to crouch or touch things, a patch of grass, a parked car, the wall's surface. Switching between cameras, I tracked its movement. In normal light, it was almost invisible, just a faint distortion in the air. Only ultraviolet revealed its true form. It approached the lobby's glass doors, paused as if listening, then simply passed through the glass like it wasn't even there. My heart raced. Sweat beaded on my forehead. Whatever this was, it was unlike anything I'd ever seen before. I watched it on the security cameras, this thing moving through the lobby. Its body rippled and shifted like water catching sunlight. Crouching, it touched the floor near the reception desk, then turned its head toward the camera. I knew it saw me somehow. I swear it did. The smooth, faceless head tilted slightly, and suddenly everything stopped, completely still, like a statue. Then it moved again, faster this time, heading toward the elevators. I panicked. My control room was on the second floor, and if this thing got into the building, I had no idea what might happen. I locked the door and grabbed my flashlight. Not that I thought it would help, but I needed something to hold on to. The elevator screen showed it moving up. When the doors opened on my floor, the figure stepped out, shimmering like a living mirage. Its long arms brushed against the walls as it moved slowly down the hallway. It stopped right outside my control room door. I held my breath, clutching the flashlight like a weapon. The thing just stood there, motionless. Then it raised a hand and pressed it against the door. No sound, but I felt the air change, the room's pressure shifting. After a moment, it lowered its hand and turned away. I watched on the monitor as it floated back down the hall, into the elevator, and out of the building. It didn't stop until reaching the property's edge, then vanished into the night. Hours passed. I was too scared to move. When sunrise finally came, I replayed the footage, hoping it would look less terrifying in daylight. The ultraviolet images remained crystal clear. The next morning, I showed the video to my supervisor. But when we pulled up the files, the ultraviolet feed was gone. Only normal footage remained. Empty hallways, a quiet parking lot. My supervisor told me to take some time off, said I looked tired. I don't work there anymore. I quit a week later. I couldn't shake the feeling this wasn't the last time I'd see that thing. Sometimes, late at night, I catch a shimmer out of the corner of my eye, just for a second. I don't know if it's my imagination or if it's still watching. All I know is I'm never going back to that building. I was flying a routine patrol that night over the northern plains, the sky above us, a canvas of stars. 3 planes, spread out in a loose V formation, cruising at 30,000 feet. Nights like these are a pilot's dream. Clear air, no turbulence, and a horizon that seems to stretch forever. The mission was simple, standard surveillance. Nothing ever happens on these runs, and I expected this night to be no different. Just the steady hum of engines and occasional radio chatter breaking the silence. I glanced at my instruments. Everything normal. Then something changed. At first, it was just a low hum in my headset, like bad radio interference. Faint static, the kind you get when communications aren't quite right. But this was different. The sound had a pattern, a rhythm, almost a melody, but not like anything I'd ever heard before. "Tower, this is Echo 1, I called in. "I'm picking up a strange signal. Any weather anomalies?" Nothing but garbled static came back. My squad mates noticed too. "You're cutting out," Ramirez said. Morales added, "Signals breaking up." The sound transformed, no longer just a hum. It became something more complex. Layers of sound, impossible instruments, voices that weren't quite voices, weaving together with an unnatural precision. It filled my headset, pushing everything else aside. I could still hear my teammates, but they sounded distant, muffled. This wasn't just sound. It pulled at me, tugging at memories, emotions I couldn't name. An overwhelming urge to follow it consumed me. "Do you hear that?" I asked, my voice trembling. Ramirez confirmed, "Yeah, I hear it." Morales' voice was tight. "What is that? Is it music?" We couldn't explain it, but we all felt it. The melody seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, vibrating in our bones, filling the air around us. Then I saw something, a glimmer ahead and below, like moonlight on water, faint but moving, shimmering in the darkness. "There's something out there," I said, leaning forward. 9 o'clock below. "Do you see it?" Ramirez responded, "Got it." "What the hell is that?" We broke formation slightly, turning toward the mysterious shimmer. The silvery craft glimmered ahead, unlike anything we'd ever seen. Smooth and organic, it pulsed with a faint glow that seemed to synchronize with an otherworldly music. No sharp edges, no seams, just an impossible shape that defied explanation. "We should report back," Morales said, his voice tight. The radio was useless. I tried to stay calm, instructing the team to spread out as we approached. The craft turned towards us, its surface rippling with starlight in a way that blurred its boundaries with the sky. The music intensified, wrapping around us like a tangible force. Suddenly, my jet slowed, not by my doing. The controls felt heavy, as if moving through thick syrup. "Controls are sluggish," Ramirez confirmed. Morales' voice trembled in agreement. Gracefully, the craft began to ascend. Something inexplicable pulled us after it. We weren't being forced, exactly, but the idea of turning away became unthinkable. Our jets struggled against an invisible resistance as we climbed past 40,000, then 50,000 feet. Stars seemed brighter, closer. My oxygen gauge flickered, warning of the thinning air. "We're going to stall," Morales warned. The music softened, almost pleading. We leveled off, circling cautiously. "It's waiting for us," Ramirez said. "Waiting for what?" Then the music surged, not with words, but with impressions, shapes, colors, emotions. A sense of profound loneliness, of searching. Images flooded my mind. Earth from above, storms crossing oceans, cities lighting up, then darkness. A warning. Something needed to be done. "It's not hostile," I said, sensing its intent. Morales asked how I knew. "I just do," I replied. "It's asking for something." The siege raft's glow intensified. Another wave of images. Another urgent musical pulse. We needed to respond, but how? We'd been planning this hiking trip for months. A chance to escape everything for a weekend. The national park we chose was remote. No cell service, hardly anyone around. Exactly the kind of quiet we wanted. It was the second day of our trip when things got strange. We were following an old, barely marked trail where you had to stay alert, watching for trail markers on trees. It wasn't a difficult hike, but it was easy to lose your way if you weren't careful. That's why we all carried compasses, knowing phone GPS wouldn't work out here. About midway through our day's hike, Sarah noticed her compass acting weird. At first, we brushed it off as a cheap knockoff with an unreliable reading. But when Matt checked his compass, he saw the same thing, the needle spinning slowly, unable to settle on a direction. When I pulled out my own compass, mine did exactly the same. There was no wind, nothing that could explain why our compasses were behaving so strangely. We were just standing there, bewildered, trying to understand what was happening. Later, during a tense debrief back at base, the higher-ups were skeptical. But the flight data confirmed our experience. Whatever we'd encountered wasn't a malfunction or a trick of the mind. To this day, I don't know what it was or why it reached out to us. But I can't forget the music or the sense that we made some kind of connection. It wasn't trying to hurt us, it was trying to communicate. When I realized turning away would be wrong, I reached for the manual beacon override, a small device we used to send out a distress signal. I activated it, broadcasting an unencrypted pulse. It was primitive, but it was all I could think to do. The craft reacted immediately. Its glow brightened, and the music swelled, almost so unding joyful. It began to ascend again, faster this time, pulling away from us. Within seconds it was gone, disappearing into the stars. The music faded with it, leaving only the hum of our engines and the vast empty sky. "What just happened?" Morales asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "I think we answered," I said. We returned to base in silence, none of us sure how to explain what we'd seen. We were hiking through dense woods when our compasses started acting strange. There were no big metal structures around, so we couldn't explain why they weren't working right. At first, we joked about being in the Bermuda Triangle of the forest, laughing off the weird magnetic interference. But the compasses weren't just broken. They were all pointing in the exact same fixed direction. The needles seemed to be struggling, persistently nudging toward a specific spot. Something felt deliberate about it. Our curiosity won out, and we decided to follow where the compasses were leading, even though it wasn't part of our original route. The terrain was challenging but manageable. uneven ground, and thick trees everywhere. We'd pause periodically to check our bearings, and each time the compasses remained locked onto that same mysterious point. After about an hour of hiking, the atmosphere began to change. The air grew heavy, like the moment before a storm, except the sky was completely clear. An unnatural silence surrounded us. No birds, no insects, just the sound of our footsteps crushing through the underbrush. Sarah was the first to mention how strange everything felt, and we all agreed something was off. Then we saw it. A perfectly circular patch of bare ground about 10 feet across, surrounded by healthy trees. Nothing grew within this circle. No grass, no moss, just exposed dirt that looked almost scorched. In the center sat a metallic object, partially buried but still visible. It was disc-shaped, about the size of a car tire, lying flat. The surface was dull, darker than brushed steel, with intricate markings that weren't random symbols but precise, deliberate patterns. None of us wanted to touch it, but we couldn't look away. The closer we got, the thicker the air felt, almost pressing against our skin. Sarah said she heard a low hum. Matt felt vibrations through his boots. When I stepped closer, I heard it too, a faint, almost musical sound just at the edge of hearing. It didn't sound mechanical, but something entirely different. We were out exploring when we found it, a disc half buried in the ground that immediately felt wrong. None of us could agree on what to do. Matt wanted to dig it up and investigate, while Sarah suggested we mark the location and report it later. I just wanted to leave, feeling like something was watching us, even though there were no eyes. Curiosity won, and we started clearing away the dirt. As we dug, more of the object was revealed. It wasn't just a simple disc, but part of something much larger, deeply embedded in the ground. Intricate patterns covered its surface, and a low hum began to grow, not loud enough to be deafening, but strong enough to make our chests vibrate. Then the markings started to glow. It wasn't a bright light, more like the soft pulse of dying embers, but with a distinct pattern. Matt tried to record it on his phone, but no electronics would work. Even Sarah's watch had stopped. Suddenly, a deep rumbling sound came from above, like something massive shifting in the sky. We looked up, but saw nothing except empty blue sky. The sound continued, growing louder and seemingly circling us. Panic set in. Matt tried to cover the object, but the dirt wouldn't stick, almost as if the ground had turned oily. The hum became a steady tone, and the glowing patterns pulsed faster. We backed away, too scared to continue, but too curious to run. Then everything stopped. The hum, the glow, the sound from above, all went silent. The air felt normal, and compasses started working again. The object sat there, dark and lifeless as before. But as we turned to leave, I swear I felt it watching us, not with eyes, but with something else entirely. We didn't speak much on the hike back. At the trailhead, we agreed to tell no one. Who would believe us? We took no pictures, and the compasses showed no unusual readings. All we had was our memory, and even that felt like it was fading. I can't stop thinking about what we found. Sometimes, in quiet moments, I hear that hum again, faint and distant. I'm not sure if it's real or just in my head, but I know whatever that thing was, it wasn't meant to be discovered. And I can't shake the feeling that it wasn't finished with us. The airbase was a world unto itself, isolated and remote, far from any city. Secrecy was the unwritten rule. You didn't ask questions, you just followed orders. I'd been part of the security detail for months, handling routine drills and acting as a go-between for the higher-ups. That afternoon started like any other patrol along the perimeter. Then a low hum began to fill the air. At first, I thought it might be a helicopter or one of our planes. But something felt different. The sound was constant, an electric buzz that seemed to vibrate through the ground and into my chest. When I looked up, expecting to see a familiar aircraft, what I saw instead made my blood run cold. A strange metallic craft was descending, unlike anything I'd ever witnessed. It wasn't a plane, not even close. The shape was bizarre, angular yet smooth, almost organic, like something dreamed up in a science fiction novel. This wasn't the typical UFO of popular stories. No flying saucer or disc. His looked alien, created by something decidedly non-human. The base erupted into chaos. Sirens blared and officers rushed to their positions, but it was too late. The craft slammed into the desert floor, skidding 100 yards before grinding to a halt. I stood frozen, unsure if I was witnessing reality or some elaborate hoax. Military personnel swarmed the crash site within minutes. They quickly secured the perimeter and established a quarantine zone. We were ordered to stay back while the higher-ups assessed the situation. That's when I saw movement, a small figure emerging from the wreckage. It wasn't human. Standing maybe 4 feet tall, the creature had unnaturally smooth, almost translucent skin. Its eyes were deep black and seemingly bottomless. Thin limbs moved with an unsettling grace, more gliding than walking. In that moment, everything I thought I knew about reality shifted. I stood frozen, unable to move. The officers around me wore expressions of shock, confusion, and fear. The creature, if that's what it was, didn't seem hostile. It didn't charge or make threatening moves. Instead, it simply stopped and tilted its head, studying us as if we were the strange ones. Orders came quickly. Detain the being. No one knew exactly what that meant, but everyone understood it had to be done. Higher-ups shouted commands into radios, and soon men in hazmat suits moved in. They kept their distance, using unfamiliar equipment, long, thin rods emitting a strange light and energy field, attempting to corral the creature without getting too close. The being didn't resist. It remained calm, watching as it was restrained. In that moment, I realized how out of our depths we were. This was beyond any operation I'd ever been part of. As the creature was placed in a containment unit, we were ordered to maintain security for the next several hours. Only senior officers were all near the crash site, and they seemed to know exactly what to do. I wasn't privy to the details or the full scope of what had happened. One thing was clear: no one was going to discuss this openly. The airbase transformed into a hub of intense activity. A dozen high-ranking officers from various agencies arrived, some familiar, others not. Everyone was on edge. The creature remained in a secure room, and our primary job was to prevent anyone from approaching. Hours passed, and strange reports began to emerge from scientists and researchers. They claimed the creature was attempting to communicate, but not through any recognizable language. It seemed to be sending signals, thoughts, and emotions rather than words. Some officers suspected psychological warfare, while others believed it was simply trying to reach out, perhaps asking for help. I was eventually called into a meeting with Commanding Officer Colonel Morgan, a man who looked like he had seen far too much in his lifetime. The atmosphere was thick with unspoken tension, and I knew this was going to be no ordinary briefing. Something was wrong at the base. The tension was thick, hanging in the air like a heavy fog. Guards moved with heightened alertness, their nerves frayed. Strange sounds echoed from the containment room, tapping, scraping, as if something was desperately trying to break free. We had been told to maintain radio silence, to avoid any contact with outside agencies or the public. The higher-ups were tight-lipped, but rumors spread like wildfire. I overheard conversations about potential interstellar conflicts, about pursuers tracking something to Earth. The thought of entities worse than the creature we held made my skin crawl. Then it happened. Without warning, the alien used some bizarre form of mental communication. The security detail in the room was suddenly incapacitated. Some men creamed. Others stood frozen in a trance-like state. In a blink, the creature escaped. The pursuit was immediate and intense. Helicopters filled the sky. Search parties combed every inch of the base. The order was clear: find the alien, dead or alive. We understood the gravity of the situation. If this creature wasn't captured, the consequences would be unimaginable. When the search ended, an eerie silence descended. The creature was gone. Some claimed it had left, others whispered it had been taken back. No one knew the truth. All we knew was that something fundamental had changed, and nothing would be the same again. My colleague was drawn and serious. "We need to figure out what we're dealing with," he said, his voice low. But we were already in too deep, and the mystery remained unsolved. Here's the rewritten version. Something happened that day, something we don't talk about. After everything went down, the base returned to normal, with people quietly moving on or being dismissed. I've been left wondering about our choices, about what might have happened if we'd done things differently. What if we'd listened to the creature? What if we'd helped it when it asked? Instead, we sealed everything away, buried it deep under layers of secrecy. And now, in the quiet of night, I find myself questioning what we've truly lost by keeping it hidden. My journey started simply enough. Like countless others, I was just posting videos for fun, outfit updates, food trend experiments, little glimpses into my life. I wasn't trying to be anything special, just killing time, sharing random moments. Then came that one video, the one I almost didn't post, a strange dream that had been lingering in my mind. In this dream, I stood in a massive blue glowing room, surrounded by tall, thin figures watching me. I wasn't scared. It felt like they were waiting for something. When I first used Pearl Harbor, OK Up, the details were already fading. But the feeling remained. So I grabbed my phone and recorded a quick video, thinking it might be mildly interesting to some people. The next morning changed everything. Over 1 million views. At first I thought it was a glitch, but the number kept climbing. Comments flooded in, thousands of them. People sharing similar experiences. They'd seen the same blue room, the same figures. Some said my description felt familiar, though they couldn't explain why. My follower count exploded. 10,000, 50,000, 100,000. Within a week, I hit 1 million. Brands started offering sponsorships. My inbox filled with messages from people who felt they knew me, like I'd spoken directly to their souls. It felt unreal. I tried convincing myself it was just algorithmic luck. But deep down, I knew something wasn't right. The dreams continued, growing more vivid with each passing night. The figures from my dreams were tall, with elongated limbs and smooth, featureless faces. Their skin seemed to shimmer like liquid metal. No words were spoken, but their thoughts pressed into my mind, seeking something I couldn't comprehend. With each dream, my online following grew exponentially. Every time I woke up, my phone showed thousands of new followers. My videos trended constantly, even the most mundane ones. A 30-second clip of me brushing my hair would rack up millions of views. Fans called me relatable and authentic, claiming they felt a deep connection. But I felt only confusion. Strange messages began appearing. First, cryptic comments on my posts. "They're watching," or "You're the bridge." I dismissed them as internet nonsense. Then came the emails, no sender names, no subject lines. Just blocks of incomprehensible text. "The connection is stabilized. Do not resist. You are the prototype. The others will follow." The message must be delivered. Geo daily tarde Michael go. Ed them repeatedly, but they always returned, finding new ways through. One night, a faint hum woke me, making my skin crawl. Everything seemed normal. My phone glowing on the nightstand, a new notification waiting. The email contained a video. It began with static, then showed the blue room from my dreams. The camera moved as if walking, revealing the figures standing in a circle, heads tilted toward the lens. One raised a hand, and the screen went black. When it returned, I was in the video wearing the same pajamas I had on in bed, standing motionless. A figure approached, reaching out, and then the video ended. I hurled my phone across the room. The next day, I tried to convince myself it was just a nightmare. But when I opened my app, a new video had appeared, one I hadn't posted. Same video from the email, the blue room, the figures, me standing among them. It already had 10 million views. I panicked. I tried to delete it, but the app wouldn't let me. Every time I refreshed the views climbed higher. The comments were full of people saying they'd had dreams about the room, that they'd seen the figures too. Some of them said they'd seen me there. That was when I realized this wasn't just about me. I didn't know what to do. I thought about quitting, deleting my account, disappearing completely. But it didn't feel like that would stop anything, whatever was happening. It was bigger than me. The dreams kept coming. But they were different now. The figures weren't just watching me. They were showing me things, cities, covered in light, strange machines that moved like they were alive, stars I didn't recognize. I felt their thoughts more clearly, like they were trying to teach me something they called it the bridge, and I was the key I don't remember how I finally got out one night. The dream stopped. The figures were gone and the blue room faded away. My follower count leveled off and the strange comments disappeared. It was like they decided I wasn't useful anymore. I still don't know what they wanted. Maybe they were testing me, or maybe I failed their test. All I know is they're still out there watching, waiting for someone else to become their bridge. I've stopped posting. I don't even use social media anymore. Sometimes I wonder if they're still keeping an eye on me, but I try not to think about it. The blue room is gone, and I'm just glad I got out. I sell roasted chestnuts on a busy street corner in the city. It's not glamorous work, but it pays the bills. My cart sits at the intersection of two crowded streets where office workers rush past, parents wrangle their kids, and tourists snap pictures of everything. I like the noise and the movement. It makes the day go faster. Most people don't stick around long. Just grab a paper bag of chestnuts, maybe smile, maybe nod, and keep going. But some nights the crowd thins out and things get strange. It started about 3 weeks ago when a man approached the cart. Tall and thin, wearing a dark coat, he didn't say anything, just stood there staring at me. His face was pale, and his eyes were strange too, wide and too shiny. I thought maybe he didn't speak English, so I smiled and held up a bag of chestnuts. "One bag?" I asked. He didn't respond, just tilted his head slightly, like he was studying me then. He reached into his coat, pulled out exact change, and placed it on the counter. I handed him the chestnuts and he walked away without a word at first. Didn't think much of it. Plenty of people are quiet, especially in the city. But then the next night he came back, same thing. The pattern started slowly. No words, no expression, just exact change and that same intense stare. It wasn't just him. 2 nights later, a woman showed up who looked a lot like the man, tall, pale, with that same strange shine in her eyes. She didn't speak, just stared at me like I was a puzzle she was trying to solve. She paid with exact change and left without eating the chestnuts. That's when I started noticing something weird about these customers. They didn't move like other people. Their steps were too smooth, like gliding instead of walking. Their faces were unnaturally still, without the little twitches or movements that make people look alive. They were too perfect, like mannequins. By the end of the week, more of them had appeared. Not every night, but often enough to be noticeable. They always came alone, always silent, always with exact change. None of them ate the chestnuts, at least not that I saw. I started feeling uneasy, though I couldn't explain why. They didn't do anything wrong. They just stood there, staring. Then one night, something happened I couldn't ignore. During a slow evening with barely anyone around, one of the quiet ones, a man in a grey scarf, approached my cart. As he reached into his pocket, I felt a strange pressure in my head. It was like someone was pushing through my thoughts, trying to dig into them. I froze, my hand hovering over the chestnuts. The pressure intensified. Suddenly, I wasn't just thinking my own thoughts. I was thinking his thoughts, or maybe he was thinking mine. I couldn't tell. There weren't words exactly, just impressions, questions, curiosity. It felt like he was rifling through my memories, flipping through them like pages in a book. I tried to speak, but my mouth wouldn't work. My mind felt split open, my private thoughts spilling out. Memories surfaced against my will. My sister, whom I hadn't called in weeks. The time I accidentally shortchanged a customer and felt too embarrassed to fix it. A scar on my hand from burning it on the cart stove. The pressure vanished as quickly as it had come. The man collected his chestnuts and coins, then simply... I walked away that night. Sleep eluded me completely. My mind kept circling back to the encounter, trying to understand what had just happened. Something about the way he looked at me felt deeply unsettling, like he knew me in a way that defied explanation. These people were different somehow, not like anyone I'd ever met. Over the following nights, I watched them. Carefully, they moved with an eerie detachment, never lingering, never speaking to anyone. Each time one approached my cart, that strange mental pressure returned, softer now, but still present, as if they were lightly skimming the edges of my thoughts. One evening I decided to experiment. I concentrated on an old childhood cartoon's theme song, humming it internally. While serving chestnuts to one of them, the figure subtly tilted its head, almost imperceptibly, then departed. I understood then they were reading my thoughts, communication without words. Paranoia crept in slowly. What else might they have seen? What secrets did they know? I tried blocking my thoughts, but the harder I attempted to clear my mind, the more I felt manipulated. Guided by some unseen force, a tall, pale woman approached my cart one night. Driven by frustration, I slammed my hand down, demanding answers. She remained unshaken. Her gaze met mine. That familiar mental pressure surged, then instantly retreated. She placed exact payment on the counter and left without taking her chestnuts trembling. I nearly abandoned my work that night, but curiosity burned within me. Who were these strange beings, and why did they persistently seek me out? The next evening I resolved to confront them when a man in a black coat arrived. I seized his wrist, shocked by its unnatural coldness, demanding explanation. He remained silent, but I sensed his response, a wordless feeling of pure curiosity. I've been hiking. Alone for years, it's my thing, really the quiet of the woods, the solitude of a bamble. On trek far from the noise of city life. Nothing beats it. That's what made me take the trip to the park that day. It wasn't my first time there, and I was looking forward to a long, peaceful walk along the river trail. But something felt different that day. The weather had been strange that morning, with a weird stillness in the air. I didn't think much of it at first. It wasn't until I was well into my hike, just past the old trail markers, that the feeling started to settle in. It wasn't just the air, it was the whole place. The trees seemed quieter than usual, even the river seemed to be running slower, almost as if the forest itself was holding its breath. After walking for a few hours, I reached a part of the trail I hadn't seen before. The path veered down to a small, secluded part of the riverbank where the trees crowded in closer, and everything felt more enclosed. The water was clear, the kind of clear you don't see in many places. It was a spot I would have passed by without thinking, but something drew me closer. Maybe it was the perfect spot to rest. I'd barely taken a few steps toward the river when I noticed something strange. There was a figure sitting at the water's edge just ahead of me. At first I thought it was another hiker, someone who had taken the same trail. But the closer I got, the more I realized how wrong I was. Then came the moment of observation. He wasn't here to hurt me. None of them were. They were just studying, watching how people lived. We thought they didn't understand speech, so they used thoughts instead. To them, it was normal, but to me, it felt like a violation. The man pulled his hand away and walked off without another word or thought. That was the last night I saw them. It's been 2 weeks, and they haven't come back. But I can't stop thinking about them, about the way they peeled back my mind like a book. They did to hurt me, but they left something behind. A question I can't answer. What do we owe to privacy, to consent, when it comes to beings who don't see the world the way we do? I still sell chestnuts on the same corner, but every time I see a tall figure in the crowd, my heart skips a beat. I don't know if they'll come back, but if they do, I'll be ready. At least I hope I will be. The river was calm, but everything around it felt charged with an otherworldly energy. A figure sat cross-legged on the bank, so still it seemed almost part of the landscape itself. At first, I could barely make out its details, just a blurred silhouette between trees and shadows. As I drew closer, the figure became clearer, and I realized this was no ordinary being. Its posture was rigid, yet calm, seated perfectly motionless. The way it was covered wasn't like any fabric or material I recognized. Instead, it shimmered, as if light bent around its form, seamlessly blending with the surrounding environment. My legs refused to move. I wanted to turn back, to retreat down the trail, but something held me in place. A strange calmness washed over me, despite the racing of my heart. I knew I shouldn't stare, but I couldn't look away. Then it moved, not suddenly, but with a deliberate acknowledgement of my presence. Its head turned slightly, and in that moment everything changed. Communication happened, not through spoken words, but through a profound mental connection. Thoughts flooded my mind, not in any human language, but with an unmistakable clarity. The message was simple: something is coming. But it wasn't a warning filled with fear or panic. It was a statement of fact, as matter of fact as predicting rain. The presence felt familiar, yet completely alien, like a distant memory just beyond comprehension. As quickly as the connection formed, it dissolved. The figure returned its gaze to Troops River, leaving me standing there. My understanding of reality fundamentally shifted. No words were spoken, no gestures made, yet everything had changed. I didn't want to speak. Part of me wanted to ask what it meant, but I knew I wasn't supposed to. I just had to understand what it had told me before taking another step. It happened again. Only this time I didn't hear it in my mind. I felt it. The ground beneath me trembled slightly, like something far off was shifting. The air grew thick, colder, and heavier. It felt like the world was holding its breath, just like the forest had been earlier that morning. The figure's presence faded, and I felt a strange pull in my chest. It wasn't physical, but more like the earth itself was trying to get my attention. The creature was still there, but I knew it was time to leave. Something was coming. I turned and walked away from the riverbank, unable to take my eyes off the being. I couldn't explain it, but I knew it wasn't from this world. Not human, not like anything from science fiction or folklore I'd ever learned. Yet, I also knew it wasn't dangerous. It simply wanted to share a warning, and now that it had, its purpose was complete. My mind raced as I walked back down the trail. What had it meant? What was coming? I didn't know, but a quiet certainty remained. There was no urgency in its words, no panic, but the message was unmistakable. When I reached the main trail, I looked over my shoulder. The figure was gone. The forest was calm again, the air lighter. It was like nothing had ever happened, but I knew something was wrong. I couldn't explain how, but I knew. That night, I couldn't sleep. The message kept echoing in my mind. Something was coming. The next day, local news confirmed it. A massive landslide had wiped out a whole section of the nearby mountain trail. The destruction was extensive, though thankful why no one was hurt. I'm still not sure if the creature was warning me about the landslide or something else entirely. The meaning remains unclear, but the certainty of its message lingers. I've been meaning to write this down for a while, putting it off mostly because I didn't want anyone to think I was crazy. Maybe getting it out will help me make sense of everything, or at least clear my head. About a year ago, I was diagnosed with cancer. It wasn't even that surprising. I'd been feeling off for a while. When I finally went to the doctor, I guess I was kind of expecting bad news. But what they told me was worse than I could have imagined. Stage 4, too advanced. They said I had maybe 6 months at best, a year if I was lucky. They didn't sugarcoat it. This wasn't a fight anymore. It was just waiting. The chemotherapy drained me completely. I lost weight and couldn't keep anything down. Most days, I spent lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, feeling my body slowly betray me. My family tried to stay positive, but I could see the truth in their eyes. I could feel the weight of it all, like a shadow following me everywhere. I tried to keep going for their sake, but even the simplest tasks felt impossible. I couldn't remember the last time I felt healthy. Then one night, everything changed. It was late, maybe around 2 or 3 in the morning. I was lying in bed, unable to sleep, my body aching in ways I didn't know were possible. My chest felt heavy, and my head was pounding. Then I heard something. At first, I thought it was just my mind playing tricks, but it was a sound inside the room, not from outside, not cars or sirens, but something shifting in the air. I couldn't see anything at first, but there was a faint humming, almost like an electric motor or a distant drone. It didn't feel right. It felt wrong, yet somehow familiar, like I'd heard it before but couldn't take place where. Don't think it was just about the landslide. It didn't feel like an ordinary disaster. I haven't been back to that trail since, and I don't think I'll go back. Maybe I was meant to see that creature. Maybe I wasn't. But I'll never forget the look in its eyes or the message it gave me. Something was coming, and whatever it was, I wasn't ready. My body was frozen, refusing to cooperate as I tried to move. Weakness consumed me, while my eyes frantically scanned the room, searching for any explanation of what was happening. At the foot of my bed stood a figure unlike anything human, towering over 7 feet tall. Its form was not solid but fluid, shifting like smoke or liquid, constantly in motion. No eyes were visible, yet I could feel an intense gaze directed at me. An overwhelming presence pressed down, thickening the air around me. Instantly, I knew this was no hallucination or fever dream. This was real. As the figure moved closer, I remained completely still, sensing its intentions. It wasn't hostile or angry. Something ancient and profound radiated from its being. Slowly, it reached out. A hand-like appendage hovered just above my chest. Communication happened not through words, but through a profound understanding. It offered a cure for my cancer, a complete healing, a way out of the miserable decline I'd been enduring. But there was a catch. This wasn't a simple medical transaction. The entity wanted something in return, a sacrifice that went beyond physical healing. It sought something deeper, more profound. My soul would be fundamentally altered, my humanity compromised. I thought about my family, about all the experiences I would miss. I considered my exhaustion from suffering, my desperate desire to see my children grow up. The offer hung before me, healing, but at an unimaginable cost. Another season changed, and I watched the sunrise, reflecting on a moment of profound desperation. I had been willing to do anything to escape the constant pain, but then I paused and considered the true cost. It wasn't just about my physical body. This would mean sacrificing my entire essence, my core beliefs, everything I had ever known and stood for. So I said no, not out loud, but with every fiber of my being. I rejected the offer. The figure seemed to consider my response, weighing my decision. Then, almost as if understanding, it began to withdraw. Its form didn't vanish instantly, but slowly dissipated into the air, leaving behind only the faintest trace of a strange shape. Suddenly, I could move again. Weak, but able to shift my arms and legs, I sat up, feeling cold sweat on my forehead. The room was quiet. The next day brought unexpected hope. At the doctor's office, I received good news for the first time in months. The cancer had retreated. Not completely, but the tumor was smaller. I had a chance. I never told anyone about that night. How could I explain an encounter with something so inexplicable? An alien-like being offering healing, but at a price I refused to pay. Yet the memory haunts me daily. Would accepting have meant a longer life? I'll never know. But I understand now that whatever approached me was far more complex than a simple healer. It was something ancient, something beyond human comprehension. I'm alive and I'm grateful. I don't know how long I have left, but I know I'll never forget the weight of that choice, or the mysterious encounter that challenged everything I believed about survival and sacrifice. Out in the desert, our archaeological team was working on what seemed like a standard site, an ancient burial ground or temple. We'd found the usual artifacts: broken pottery, stone carvings, animal bones. Nothing extraordinary at first, but archaeology demands thoroughness. A week into our dig, we uncovered something completely unexpected: a hidden chamber that hadn't shown up on any preliminary scans. A massive stone slab sealed its entrance, covered in symbols unlike anything I'd ever studied. Not Egyptian, not Sumerian, something entirely different. When we finally opened the chamber, the atmosphere felt strange. The air seemed heavy, and the walls seemed to hum with an almost imperceptible vibration. On a dark, smooth surface that wasn't quite stone or metal, a set of documents lay arranged with deliberate precision, as if someone had carefully placed them, waiting for discovery. These documents were bizarre. Not written on traditional materials like paper or parchment. They were thin and translucent, almost like flexible glass. The writing was precise, almost mechanical, with symbols that didn't resemble any known script. As I began decoding them, something peculiar happened. The symbols weren't static. They seemed to shift subtly, just enough to make me doubt my own perception. Sarah, our team's linguist, eventually made a breakthrough. What we'd found wasn't just writing. It was a complex code. The documents revealed an astonishing story, a treaty signed thousands of years ago. But this wasn't an agreement between human civilizations. It was a peace treaty between humans and beings not of this world, extraterrestrial entities who had contacted Earth long before recorded history began. Each revelation made the chamber feel more surreal, more charged with an inexplicable energy that defied our understanding of archaeological discovery. A war had altered everything, and this treaty was its aftermath. The conditions were unclear, but coexistence was promised. The beings would depart, yet only under specific terms. Humanity was tasked with maintaining something called the balance, a concept I couldn't fully grasp, but since Ed was critical. Initially, we dismissed it as another mythical narrative, like the ancient stories of gods and monsters. Then the messages began. First came radio transmissions, not voices, but strange tones. Dissonant and unsettling, almost musical, we initially assumed it was satellite interference, but the patterns became deliberate, undeniably a signal. The second communication was more direct. Through the camp's communication system, a voice emerged, deep and resonant, speaking an incomprehensible language. Yet somehow we understood its emotional core: anger, disappointment, a stark warning. That night, sleep evaded us all. The camp remained silent, save for wind whispers and equipment hums. I stared at documents whose symbols seemed to shift mockingly, guarding their secrets. The following day, something felt wrong with the sky. Sunlight appeared dimmer, shadows unnaturally sharp. An unseen presence seemed to watch us, an unspoken tension hanging in the air. When they arrived, nothing matched our expectations. No little green men or monstrous creatures. Instead, impossibly tall beings that shimmered between light and shadow, gliding soundlessly. One approached me, immobilizing me completely. A touch, not physical but mental, communicated everything. You broke the treaty. I wanted to protest my innocence, to explain my ignorance, but no words emerged. What radiated from this being wasn't anger, but a profound, overwhelming sadness. They were watching, waiting. I can't fully explain what happened, but I need to get this out. I'm a single mom with a 7-year-old son, Luke, and life has always been challenging. We didn't have much, but we had each other. Everything changed about 3 months ago. One night, after a long shift at the diner, I was sitting in the living room reading while Luke slept. The house was dark, with just a lamp beside me. Suddenly, I heard something outside, footsteps that seemed oddly mechanical, with a strange rhythm that felt completely out of place. When I first noticed the noise, I almost ignored it. It was a quiet neighborhood, and we rarely got unexpected visitors. But something about those sounds made me uneasy. Then the porch light flickered. During our expedition, something similar happened. We were at the dig site when these beings appeared among us. They didn't touch anything or harm anyone. They just observed. Everyone froze, standing like statues as these entities moved around us. Then, as suddenly as they arrived, they vanished. The humming stopped, and the air felt normal again. But we knew they weren't finished. We left the site the next day, grabbing only what we could carry, and driving out in complete silence. No words were necessary. We all understood the same thing. The beings were waiting, not angry yet, but watching for something. The organization that funded our dig took over everything. We were instructed not to discuss what we'd seen. I don't know what happened to the documents, and I'm not sure anyone will believe me. But I had to write this down, maybe as a warning, maybe just as a record. One thing I know for certain, they're still out there, and they haven't forgotten. The porch light flickered 3 times, an eerie signal before going dark. My heart raced as I walked to the window, scanning the empty street. Only the wind moved, rustling through the trees. I tried to dismiss it as an old house glitch or my imagination playing tricks. Returning to my book, something changed. A voice emerged, not from outside or the air, but inside my mind. It wasn't my thought. This was different. Clear, calm, distant, yet intimate. "Do not be afraid," it said. I froze, unable to move or think. Strangely, fear wasn't my first reaction. Curiosity took over. The voice felt non-threatening, just present. "We need your help," it continued. "You are the one we've chosen." Time seemed to suspend. Then, as abruptly as it began, the voice vanished. I snapped back, switching on every light in the house. My brain struggled to process what had just happened. I checked on Luke, sleeping peacefully, and grabbed my phone, desperate to make sense of things. Was I losing my mind? I scanned the news for any explanation, new technology, mental health phenomena, but found nothing. The experience felt too real to be exhaustion or stress. Strange occurrences followed. Unseen eyes watched me. Unexplained footsteps echoed. Whispers drifted through rooms. The house itself seemed to change, not physically, but in atmosphere. The air felt different, charged with something unexplainable. One evening while cooking, the voice returned. "We are here," it said, more present, more real. Nervousness replaced my initial calm. "We are in you," it continued. Suddenly, everything became clear. This wasn't just a voice. Something was inside me. They hadn't chosen me by accident. I was selected, though for what I didn't yet understand. Something inside me knew this wasn't random. They had been watching, waiting, and told me I possessed the perfect qualities to help them. At first, I was skeptical. The whole situation felt too unreal to be true. But as they spoke, my understanding grew. The voice wasn't singular. It was a collective, a species far from Earth that had observed us for years. They needed someone like me to bridge the gap between their world and ours. Their intention wasn't hostile. They needed human empathy. They chose me because of my ability to understand others, to feel deeply and connect. But it went beyond simple kindness. The emotions humans experience, love, pain, fear, were crucial to their understanding. I was to be their host, the ER ambassador, facilitating connection with humanity. Yet there was a price I didn't initially comprehend. They wouldn't just pass through. They would settle in, merging with me. My personality, emotions, and sense of self would become intertwined with theirs. The implications were overwhelming. Luke was my priority. How could I bring something so alien into our lives? But simultaneously, I felt a profound sense of responsibility. It seemed like my destiny, like I had been chosen for this purpose. The voice always emphasized my choice, but it didn't feel like a real choice, more like an inevitable path. I contemplated the consequences extensively. How would Luke react? How would the world respond? How much of myself would I lose? But their intentions were pure. They weren't seeking world domination or harm. They needed someone who could genuinely connect, communicate, and help. They promised never to hurt me. The transformation would be gradual, almost imperceptible at first. After careful, lengthy consideration, I agreed. Not lightly, but with a deep understanding of their mission and my potential role in it. The camping trip had started out normal enough. 4 of us, me, my brother Ethan, and our friends Mike and Jenna, had chosen a spot deep in the woods, specifically for stargazing. We weren't experts, just people who loved looking up at the night sky and wanted an escape from city life. The first night was peaceful. We set up camp, built a fire, and talked late into the evening. The sky was incredibly clear, more stars visible than I'd ever seen before. A few shooting stars streaked across the darkness, and everything felt calm and perfect. Something changed on the second night. At first, the shifts were barely noticeable. The air grew unexpectedly cold, despite the weather forecast. The woods around us went completely silent. No wind, no insects, no roo, sterling leaf. It was as if everything was holding its breath, waiting. Mike was the first to notice something strange about the sky. We thought he was imagining things, but then we all saw it. Something was definitely different. That moment marked the beginning of everything. The changes in me weren't instant. Gradually, I started noticing subtle differences. My thoughts became clearer, more focused. I could sense things around me in new ways. Sometimes I would know what people were feeling before they even spoke, especially with Luke. I could tell when something was wrong, even when he said nothing. The voice was always there, a constant presence in the back of my mind. Always watching. I'm still me in some ways, but parts of me have fundamentally changed. I think differently now, understanding things in ways I never could before. Some days I feel distant from myself. It's like I'm not entirely in control of my emotions. The alien presence inside me hums quietly beneath everything I do. Balancing this with being a mother, with living my life, is exhausting. I haven't told Luke what's happened. I don't think he would understand, and I'm not sure I fully understand it myself. The long-term effects remain unknown. But I was chosen for something bigger than myself, something about saving us all. And somehow that makes bearing this burden easier. In the end, my choice wasn't just about saving myself. It was about saving everyone. The stars weren't where they had been the night before. They shifted like ripples in a pond after a rock is thrown. Something felt off. Ethan tried to explain it away as an atmospheric phenomenon, but none of us believed him. The stars weren't just distorting. They were bending and twisting as if someone was stirring them. Jenna wanted to capture the moment, but her phone was dead. In fact, none of our electronics worked. The flashlight flickered and went out. Even the fire behaved strangely. Its flames stretched upward, pulled by an invisible force, then suddenly froze mid-dance. The lights remained the same, but the warmth vanished. We stood paralyzed, watching. Then the ground began to vibrate. This wasn't like an earthquake. The rhythm was too perfect, like a slow, steady heartbeat pulsing through our shoes. Oddly, nothing around us moved. Trees stood motionless. No cracks appeared in the earth. Jenna spoke first, describing a dizzy sensation. Mike nodded in agreement. I felt it too, like we were standing on something not quite solid. The forest seemed to have transformed into a mere image of itself. Everything looked the same, but something fundamental had changed. Suddenly, the sky split open. One moment it was rippling, the next it peeled back like an invisible zipper, was revealing something beyond. What we saw wasn't space or more stars. It was a blank, colorless void, an endless nothingness that defied description. We were frozen, unable to look away. The familiar stars vanished, replaced by this empty expanse. Then something emerged, not a ship, but a massive shape composed of light and shadow. It constantly shifted, never maintaining a single form. Sometimes a sphere, sometimes a spiral, sometimes a towering structure. The ground's vibrations stopped, but a new sensation took over. A low hum so deep we felt it inside our bones. It wasn't just a sound. It was a profound, all-encompassing feeling that seemed to resonate through our entire being. The campsite fell silent. Mike tried to speak, but no sound emerged. His face was frozen in terror, mirroring our own expressions. Something was wrong. The air felt heavy, almost unbreathable. Then it happened. A shimmering bubble formed around us, like heat waves rising from hot pavement. It enclosed our campsite and part of the surrounding forest, warping everything inside. Trees outside bent and stretched, the ground seeming to tilt away. Time itself felt strange. Our campfire remained frozen, its light neither fading nor flickering. A low hum grew louder. Tiny sparks of light began dancing in the air, appearing and vanishing in an instant. Above us, a shapeless form hung motionless in the sky, shifting and changing. Soft, misty beams of light descended from it, moving with deliberate purpose and scanning the ground. When one beam swept across our campsite, something extraordinary happened. For a brief moment, I felt weightless, floating yet somehow still standing in the same spot. My body seemed to disappear. As quickly as it began, the phenomenon started to recede. The hum faded, and the shimmering dome began collapsing inward toward the floating shape. Our campfire flickered back to life. Sounds of wind returned, and the cold air felt normal again. The sky shape pulsed once, like a deep breath, then slipped back through an invisible tear. The void sealed instantly, stars snapping back into place. Everything looked normal. We sat in stunned silence, staring at the fire. When we finally spoke, our interpretations differed wildly. Jenna believed it was advanced technology. Mike suggested an unknown natural phenomenon. Ethan refused to discuss it at all. At first light, we packed up and left, none of us wanting to spend another night in that place. Even now, years later, I can't explain what happened. But sometimes, when I look at the night sky, I wonder if something is still out there, watching, waiting. I've been a pilot my whole life, flying planes for decades. It was a career that defined me. Not military, not commercial, just pure passion for being in the sky. After years of cockpit adventures, I decided it was time to retire. One last flight seemed fitting, a solo journey to say goodbye to something I'd loved for so long. The early morning was stunning. Soft golden light spread across the landscape as I took off, feeling the familiar hum of the plane beneath me. For the first time in years, I felt truly calm. The world looked small from up there, and I was at peace. My radio was off, my focus entirely on the flight and the quiet surrounding me. That's when things changed. At first, it was just a feeling, a strange sensation that I wasn't alone anymore. I spotted a dot in the distance, moving differently from any aircraft I'd encountered before. It wasn't a commercial flight or a military jet. This was something else entirely. As it drew closer, I realized something was fundamentally wrong. The object was massive, far larger than anything I'd ever seen. Its movement defied logic, hovering more than flying, behaving in ways that made no sense to an experienced pilot like myself. I should have turned back, should have flown away, but I didn't. I was frozen, watching it approach. I've navigated through countless challenging situations, thunderstorms, equipment failures, unpredictable conditions. But this was different. This was something completely beyond my comprehension. Years of flying experience couldn't prepare me for what I was witnessing. In all my years in the sky, I'd never seen anything like it. The object continued to move closer, and I remained transfixed, unable to look away, unable to act. The craft hung in the sky, unlike anything I'd ever seen. Its surface was otherworldly, smooth and almost translucent, shimmering with an inner light. No seams, no rivets, nothing that hinted at conventional construction. It made no sound, just a soft whisper of air surrounding it. I couldn't get closer. It hovered high above, defying the movement of any aircraft I knew. Time seemed to stretch and pause as I watched, suspended in mid-air, trying to comprehend what I was seeing. Something about its presence was magnetic, impossible to ignore, yet subtly commanding. Then I felt it, a communication that wasn't sound but a sensation. A presence reaching out, vibrating through the air, or perhaps directly into my mind. The craft shifted, and for a moment I thought it might collide with me. Instead, the air rippled, and suddenly it was there, just hundreds of feet from my plane. Strangely, I felt no fear. A calm settled over me, telling me this was significant. The craft began to communicate through images, a rapid slideshow of unfamiliar landscapes, strange cities, and beings unlike any I'd encountered. Emotions flooded through these visions: fear, urgency, a profound sense of warning. The message was clear, though not spoken in words. You must share this. It resonated through me, an imperative that went beyond language. My heart raced with the weight of what I'd experienced, understanding that something momentous had just occurred. The sky had been watching me, and now everything felt different. My mind was spinning with the urgency of what I'd experienced. The craft had drifted away silently into the distance. Leaving me stunned and confused, I knew what it wanted, what it had shown me, but sharing seemed impossible. Who would understand? How could I explain such an encounter? The craft vanished, completely fading into the sky as if it had never existed at all. My flight continued, with my thoughts racing, trying to process the incredible moment. Eventually I landed back at base, but the ground felt strange and unfamiliar after what I'd witnessed up there. The warning about the future consumed my thoughts for days. I couldn't tell anyone. The message kept repeating in my head, "You must share this," but doubt plagued me. What if I'm wrong? What if telling someone puts us in danger? Or worse, what if no one believes me? Every time I look up now, I wonder if they're watching, waiting to see what I'll do next. It began with a dream, unlike my usual forgettable nightmares. This one was different. Haunting, standing alone in an empty concert hall. No audience, no orchestra, just me and my violin. The instrument appeared in my hands almost magically. The music started on its own, strange high notes playing a melody that seemed to speak without words. My fingers moved involuntarily, trying to follow an impossible tune each night. The dream returned, the dark hall, the mysterious melody mocking my attempts to understand it. When I woke, my heart would race as if I'd been running instead of sleeping. At first, I dismissed it as stress from my upcoming performance, but something deeper was happening. Something I couldn't explain. The violin played its cryptic message, and I was powerless to comprehend its meaning. Scribbling notes from my nightstand, but they made no sense. Sharp jumps, odd rhythms, unnatural key changes. Hours of trying to play the piece the next morning failed completely. The intervals were wrong, the tempo inhuman. How could I be a professional violinist if I couldn't even play music from my own dream? The dreams continued, night after night. Each time the music grew louder, more insistent. It wasn't just a melody anymore. Harmonies emerged, layers of sound that shouldn't work together but somehow did. The experience was overwhelming. I'd wake up exhausted, my head throbbing like I'd been at a loud concert. One night, I fought sleep. I practiced scales, drank coffee, anything to stay alert. But around 3 a.m., my eyes betrayed me. This dream was different. A figure stood in the shadows, tall, thin, almost skeletal. Its skin gleamed like polished stone, pale and unnatural. Faintly blue eyes watched me, unmoving, silent. The music erupted, louder than ever. The figure raised a hand as if conducting, and suddenly my bow arm moved independently. It jerked across the strings painfully, unnaturally. I tried to stop, but my body wasn't mine anymore. The melody shifted, growing faster, more complex. I felt the strings cutting my fingers, the bow hairs fraying under impossible strain. Waking up, my hand shook so badly I could barely hold water. Terrified, I avoided my violin for days. But the dreams persisted, growing more intense. The figure approached closer each time, blue eyes burning brighter, music becoming almost deafening. The pain followed me into my waking hours. Then everything changed. One night, the music continued after I woke up. Faint at first, like a distant sound, I realized this wasn't a dream. The impossible tune echoed through my apartment. Heart racing, I followed the sound to my practice room. There, my violin stood on its stand, the bow waiting. The violin lay resting across the strings, barely vibrating as if someone had just finished playing. The room felt heavy, like it was holding its breath. Something compelled me to pick up the instrument, and the moment it touched my hands, music surged through me. My fingers moved independently, playing notes that didn't quite make sense, but this time felt different. My body moved with an impossible speed, faster than I'd ever thought possible. The melody flowed like water, strange, beautiful, and terrifying all at once. When the music stopped, the silence was overwhelming. That's when I realized I wasn't alone. The figure from my dreams stood in the corner, more solid than I could have imagined. I wanted to scream, to run, but I was frozen. A silent communication passed between us. Without words, I understood this wasn't just music. It was a message, an attempt to share something profound. Their culture, their history, their very existence seemed to pulse through. It's the melody. Time seemed to stand still. When the figure finally vanished, I collapsed. The music disappeared, but something remained, an imprint in my mind. I could still hear it, feel its rhythm in my veins. Months have passed, the dream hasn't returned, but the melody lingers. I've been writing it down, piecing it together slowly. It's still impossible to play completely, but I'm getting closer. Late at night, I sometimes catch glimpses or hear faint hums that remind me of that moment. They're not gone, I don't think, but I'm not afraid anymore. Whatever they were, they simply wanted to be heard. It was just another late shift at the pharmacy. Quiet nights, predictable routines, just the regulars picking up medications, the occasional new face buying something for a sick child or a headache. I kept myself busy, organizing shelves, wiping the counter for what felt like the 100th time. Then, around 11:30 p.m., everything changed. A man walked in, tall, thin, seemingly ordinary. He shuffled up to the counter, swallowed in a grey coat that hung loose on his frame. A prescription slip dangled from his hand, his face blank and expressionless. When he slid the paper across to me, I realized something was off. In all my years as a pharmacist, I'd never encountered anything like this. The prescription was for a drug called Xylon-Actin, with bizarre dosage instructions. 2 capsules every 2.5 hours, and a strict warning to avoid sunlight for 17 hours after taking it. The doctor's name was barely a scribble, and the clinic address meant nothing to me. I glanced up. "I don't think we carry this," I told him. He nodded, as if this was exactly what he expected. "Can you order it?" he asked, his voice flat and emotionless. Nothing, not a single record, which was strange. Even experimental drugs usually left some trace. When I explained this, he simply nodded again and walked out. I dismissed it as a prank or a mistake. Maybe the drug name was wrong or it was just another scam prescription. But the next night, A woman arrived. Same blank stare. Same mechanical movements. Her prescription was identical. Xylin Actin, with those same odd instructions. "Are you related to the man from last night?" I asked. She tilted her head, responding with a rehearsed-sounding, "I don't know him." Over the next week, more people came. Each time, the pattern repeated. Different individuals, but all with the same pale complexion, stiff movements, and that lifeless tone. One wore sunglasses at night, claiming, "Light hurts my eyes." I grew suspicious. I tried calling the clinic number. Dead end. The address didn't exist on any map. It was as if these people were materializing from nowhere, united by this mysterious prescription. Something wasn't right, and I was determined to find out what. I was working at the pharmacy when a young woman in her early 20s came in with the same prescription as the others. I decided to ask her directly what the medication was for. She stared at me for a long moment before answering, "To prevent adaptation failure." When I asked what that meant, she didn't respond. Instead, she turned to leave. Panic gripped me. I couldn't let another person walk away without answers. I stepped around the counter to stop her. Suddenly, she moved with an unnatural speed. Her hand shot out, grabbing my wrist with an ice-cold grip. "Stop asking questions," she said, in an eerily calm voice. Then she walked out, leaving me standing there with my heart pounding. That night, sleep eluded me. I kept wondering about her cryptic words and her strange demeanor. The next day, I started investigating. I searched through names and addresses, looking for any connection between these patients. Nothing made sense, but then I noticed something interesting. Every patient had come from the same area, a few miles outside of town, near an abandoned industrial park. Despite knowing it was risky, I decided to investigate. The next evening after my shift, I drove out to the location. The place was desolate, rusted fences, broken windows, and an eerie silence. I parked a distance away and walked in. At first, everything seemed normal, just empty buildings and overgrown weeds. Then I heard voices, low, strange murmuring sounds coming from one of the warehouses. I crept closer, trying to stay quiet. Peering through a broken window, I saw something bizarre. A group of people stood in a circle, making clicking and hissing noises like insects. In the center was a large container with a faint green glow. Suddenly, one of them turned. For a split second, their eyes glowed like an animal caught in headlights. That was enough to terrify me. I ran back to my car and drove home, my heart racing. I never went back to work. I called in sick and quit the following week. I don't know what those people were or what they were doing, but I wanted no part of it. Though I haven't seen them since, sometimes late at night, I think I hear something. Those clicking sounds keep coming back, and I can't shake the feeling that something's not right. But I know one thing for sure. I'm never going back to that night in 1962. During the Cold War, I was part of a four-man squadron flying reconnaissance missions out of Ramstein Air Base. We were the Air Force's watchful eyes, always alert for anything out of... The ordinary tensions were sky-high back then. You could almost feel the electricity crackling around us. Our patrol took us over West Germany, skirting the edge of Soviet airspace, on a crystal-clear night with stars so close they seemed touchable. We had a straightforward mission. Fly a loop, monitor radio frequencies and gather intelligence. Everything was proceeding normally, until a scrambled order came through, redirecting us east to Sector 402. No explanation, just coordinates, which wasn't unusual. We followed orders without question as we adjusted course and climbed to avoid radar detection. Something strange caught my eye, a peculiar blip on the radar moving in ways no conventional aircraft or bird would. It would dart, stop, then dart again, always staying just beyond our precise tracking. I radioed the others, Captain Harris. Confirmed he saw it too. Something felt deliberate about its movements. Then I saw it with my own eyes, a mile off our starboard side, glowing softly in the darkness. Definitely not a path. Plain, this was a flattened sphere with no distinct lights, just a shifting luminescence that seemed almost alive. Harris muttered something under his breath, but we had little time to contemplate its nature. In an instant, the object zoomed toward us, closing the impossible distance in a heartbeat. It stopped so abruptly, it defied every physical law I understood. Hovering silently beside Harris's wing, Harris ordered us not to engage, but the object seemed to play with us, circling our planes. When it passed near me, I could see its surface a bakut, seamless silver reflecting moonlight. Like liquid mercury, my heart raced, and I felt on the verge of panic. Harris tried to maintain composure, but we all knew something extraordinary was happening, something that would challenge everything we thought we knew about flight, and possibly even our understanding of what exists beyond our world. Communicate with it, he flashed, his lights in a pattern slow and steady, but it didn't respond. Instead, it shot straight up, disappearing into the night. We thought it was gone, but then it came back, this time directly. In front of us, break formation scatter, Harris barked. We split off, each of us diving and climbing in different directions. The object didn't chase one of us, it chased all of us. It would dart from one plane to another faster than anything I'd ever seen. Like it was studying us then. My instruments went haywire. My altimeter spun wildly, the radio filled with static, and the stick in my hand felt sluggish, like I was fighting against something I wasn't the only one. I've lost control. One of the others shouted, "It's messing with the plane." My heart was in my throat. I thought for sure I was going to crash, but then everything just stopped. The object pulled, back hovering in the distance, as if it had lost interest. "What now?" I asked, my voice shaking. "We stay put," Harris said. "Let it make the next move." It did. The glow around it intensified. Then it emitted a bright flash. I thought I was blind for a second, but when my vision cleared, the thing was gone. Just like that, it had vanished. Without a trace, we regrouped. Returned to base in silence. None of us knew what to say when we landed. We were immediately debriefed by a group of men I'd never seen before. They weren't Air Force. That much was clear. They took our flight logs, confiscated our helmets, and told us to forget what we saw. National security, one of them said. This incident did not happen. Harris argued with them, but it didn't matter. The next day, we were reassigned to separate squadrons. The official report said we encountered an unregistered Soviet aircraft, but I know what I saw that wasn't anything made on this planet. To this day, I can't look up at the night sky without feeling like I'm being watched, whatever that thing was. It wasn't human, and whoever covered it up knew a lot. More than they were letting on. We got the call just after midnight. The higher-ups didn't give us much to go on, just coordinates in the middle of a desert, and orders to secure the area. They used the term unidentified object, but the tone suggested more than in a routine incident. I was part of a 5-man squadron, experienced enough to know when something wasn't right. The fact that they scrambled us so quickly and emphasized secrecy only confirmed it. The ride out was quiet. Our convoy, the night sky, held a silence that felt heavy with unspoken tension. Our squadron was on a mission that seemed routine, but something felt off from the start. We received coordinates for a desert location with vague orders to secure the area. When the object first appeared, we tried communicating through light signals. Slow, steady flashes meant nothing to it. Instead, it shot straight up, vanishing into the darkness. For a moment, we thought it was gone, but it returned, this time positioning itself directly in front of us. Harris's voice cut through the radio. "Break formation. Scatter." We split up, each pilot diving and climbing in different directions. But this wasn't a typical pursuit. The object didn't chase just one of us. It pursued the entire squadron. It darted between planes with impossible speed, almost like it was studying us. Suddenly, my instruments went crazy. The altimeter spun wildly, the radio crackled with static, and my control stick felt sluggish, like something was fighting against my movements. I wasn't alone. Another pilot shouted that the object was interfering with his plane. My heart raced. I was certain we were going to crash. Then, just as abruptly as it began, everything stopped. The object pulled back, hovering in the distance, as if it had lost interest. "What now?" I asked, my voice trembling. "Stay put," Harris responded. "Let it make the next move." And it did. The object's glow intensified, followed by a blinding flash. When my vision cleared, it had vanished without a trace. Back at base, we were immediately confronted by unfamiliar men. Definitely not Air Force. They confiscated our flight logs and helmets, instructing us to forget what we'd seen. National security, one of them stated. Harris argued, but it was futile. The next day, we were reassigned to separate squadrons. The official report claimed we'd encountered an unregistered Soviet aircraft, but I know what I saw. Whatever that object was, it wasn't from this planet. To this day, when I look at the night sky, I can't shake the feeling of being watched. Something happened that night, something that those in power knew far more about than they were willing to admit. The desert stretched out beneath a black sky studded with stars, no moon in sight, just the faint glow of the Milky Way above. Our vehicle rolled over uneven terrain, the engine's hum the only sound breaking the stillness. As we approached the coordinates, a strange light caught our attention. It wasn't natural. A soft, bluish-white glow hung steadily over the horizon, casting long, faint shadows across the sand. No flickering, no pulsing, just an unwavering luminescence. We stopped half a mile away and dismounted, approaching on foot. The air felt unnaturally cold and carried a metallic taste. The light grew brighter, but never blinding, almost inviting, yet we remained alert. Cresting the final dune, we froze. A city lay before us, small but unmistakable. Buildings rose in strange angular patterns, their edges sharp and clean. They seemed to shimmer, not quite solid, almost translucent, as if constructed from light itself. The entire city pulsed faintly, with a glow running through streets and structures like a living entity. "Secure the perimeter," Sergeant Whitman ordered, his voice steady despite his tightened grip on his rifle. We split into pairs, circling the city cautiously. Closer inspection revealed buildings without windows or doors, just smooth surfaces reflecting a faint light. Streets curved in unnatural ways, isting like they followed some alien logic. "Looks like it's made of energy," Rodriguez muttered. Then we saw them. Figures moving within the city, dozens, maybe more, not human, but humanoid, taller, thinner, with elongated heads. Their movements were too fluid, their forms shimmering and flickering like the city's light. "They're not real," I said, unsure. Rodriguez nodded, his face pale. We regrouped at the city's edge. Whitman radioed for instructions while we held position, watching the impossible city pulse and breathe around us. We lost all radio communication. The radios were completely silent, like we'd entered a dead zone. Whitman was clear, no one goes anywhere alone. Nobody needed a second warning. This place felt off, and we were staying tight as a unit. Stepping into the city, the atmosphere changed. The air grew heavy, pressing against my skin with an invisible weight. Silence surrounded us, broken only by a faint, low humming that seemed to emanate from the structures themselves. Strange figures moved around us with purpose. They walked in precise lines or gathered in open spaces, completely ignoring our presence. We might as well have been ghosts. Then the walls came alive. Three-dimensional projections flickered into existence like living holograms. Images of Earth unfolded before us. Dense jungles with unknown animals moving naturally, massive elephant herds crossing plains, villages with straw huts, bustling markets filled with trading people. "What the hell is this?" Rodriguez whispered. "Our history," Whitman responded, his voice tight. Every building displayed a different scene. Some showed ancient moments like pyramid construction. Others depicted modern cities with towering skyscrapers. It wasn't just events. The city seemed to be documenting everything: plants, animals, people, weather patterns. A living library of existence. In the central square, projections grew larger and more intricate. Walls displayed humanity's extremes: brutal battle scenes with soldiers locked in combat, their faces contorted in pain, and intimate moments like a family laughing around a fire. "This isn't just history," Lopez said. "It's everything." The figures drew closer, faceless, with smooth surfaces where eyes and mouths should be. Their bodies flickered like static, made of the same shifting light as the city. Mostly, they continued moving around us, but then one stopped. It turned toward us, head tilting slightly, the first acknowledgement of our presence. I felt its attention like a weight on my chest, though there were no eyes to confirm it was staring. Whitman raised his rifle, his voice wavering. "Stay back." The figure remained motionless, but the hum in the air grew louder, vibrating through my bones. Projections around us flickered, their images distorting. Then, in my head, I heard a sensation more than words, a feeling, an understanding. Observe, learn, preserved. I staggered back, clutching my head. The others reacted similarly, wincing as if struck by a blast of sound. The figure tilted its head, its light pulsing faster. "We need to leave," Whitman said, his voice sharp now. We backed away quickly but carefully, keeping our eyes on the figures. They didn't follow, but the hum grew almost unbearable with each step, projections blurred, collapsing into static. When we crossed the city's boundary, the hum stopped. The air felt lighter, the metallic taste gone. No one spoke as we returned to the convoy, each lost in thought. The city glowed faintly behind us, but none looked back. Whitman tried the radio again, and this time it worked. We reported what we saw, though I don't think anyone believed us. The official report buried it as an unexplained phenomenon. Sometimes I think about that kapog. Itty what it was doing out there in the middle of nowhere. It wasn't hostile, not really, but it wasn't friendly either. It was just there, watching, recording, preserving. I can't shake the feeling that it's still out there, glowing in the desert, documenting everything we do. It wasn't supposed to be a big expedition. Just a few experienced cavers exploring a barely mapped system deep in the mountains, far from any towns. A local guide told us the caves went on for miles, with some passages tight and others opening into huge chambers. The first day was uneventful. We descended through a wide gap in the rock face, sloping down into the earth. The air was cool, damp, carrying the smell of wet stone. Nothing seemed unusual, just stalactites trickling, silence surrounding us. Our expedition had been methodical. 2 days into exploring the cave system, we'd carefully marked our route and set up camp in a dry chamber. By the second day, we were pushing deeper, with the cave branching into multiple passages. Eric, an experienced geologist who'd done dozens of similar trips, and I decided to split into pairs to cover more ground. We were mapping and sampling our way through when we discovered the chamber. At first, it seemed unremarkable, a space roughly the size of a small house with smooth, high-arched walls. But Eric noticed something unusual. The walls weren't entirely natural. Evenly spaced grooves spiraled from floor to ceiling, looking less like they were carved and more like they'd been melted or shaped by something beyond our understanding. In the chamber's center stood an artifact, the only word that felt right. Barrel-sized and cone-shaped with a broken tip, its metallic surface bore shifting patterns that seemed almost alive. What started as a potential trick of our headlamp light quickly became something more unsettling. The patterns genuinely moved. We stood in stunned silence. Eric, ever the scientist, wanted to investigate closely. I felt uneasy, sensing something fundamentally wrong about the object. Despite my reservations, Eric approached, brushing away dust and debris from its base. A low hum began to fill the chamber. It wasn't loud, but we could feel it vibrating through our chests. Eric froze, his hand hovering just above the artifact's surface. "Do you hear that?" he asked. I nodded, unable to speak. The hum intensified. The air grew heavy, pressing down on us. Suddenly, the artifact activated. A deep, resonant sound made the walls shake. Bright, sharp light pulsed from its surface, unlike anything I'd ever witnessed. Eric stumbled backward, dropping his tools. We both scrambled to the chamber's edge, overwhelmed by the inexplicable phenomenon unfolding before us. The desert stretched out around me, endless and quiet. I'd been working for 2 weeks, studying rock formations in this remote location. The isolation was deliberate, fewer distractions, just me and the landscape. Mostly sandstone terrain, nothing remarkable at first glance. My research was progressing when everything changed. A sound unlike anything I'd ever experienced began to build. It wasn't just noise. This was pure energy that vibrated through my entire body, making coherent thought impossible. The chamber's walls seemed to focus and amplify the sound into a single point above an artifact we'd discovered. Suddenly, a blinding flash of light silenced everything. For a moment, absolute stillness hung in the air. Then a low, distant rumble emerged from somewhere high above us. The ground started trembling, and small rocks and dust cascaded from the ceiling. Eric grabbed my arm, shouting something I couldn't hear over the mounting noise. We ran, somehow navigating the tunnels, until we reached the main passage. As the tremors subsidized, we found the rest of our team. They were pale and shaken, reporting they'd heard the strange sound even from the other side of the cave system. We unanimously decided to leave. The artifact felt too strange, too dangerous. None of us wanted to remain and discover what might happen next. Our hike back to the surface was tense, with every shadow and sound setting my nerves on edge. When we finally emerged into daylight, a momentary sense of relief washed over me, until we saw something unusual in the sky. Beyond the atmosphere, a faint ripple moved with clear purpose, shifting and pulsing like heat waves. After a final burst of light, it vanished. Eric and I tried explaining what we'd witnessed, but the others were uninterested. By the time we reached civilization, the entire experience already felt distant and unreal. Late at night, I still wonder about that artifact, about the sound it made, and whether something, somewhere, might have heard its strange call. During my geological expedition, the landscape was punctuated by basalt columns and unusual terrain. Something about this region didn't align with standard geological timelines. Mineral compositions and erosion patterns seemed out of place. My camp sat near a dried riverbed. Days were spent hiking, collecting samples, and making careful observations. Nights were quiet, just wind sounds and occasional desert animal movements. The isolation was both peaceful and unsettling. On the 13th day, I discovered an intriguing rock formation. A cluster of stones stood apart from the surrounding landscape. These rocks were different, smoother, almost polished, with a darker color and faint metallic sheen. Their symmetry suggested deliberate shaping rather than natural erosion. I spent hours studying these rocks. Measurements, sketches, and sample collection consumed my afternoon. Something felt strange, though. I couldn't articulate why. They seemed too perfect to be natural, yet I had no alternative explanation. That evening, an inexplicable unease settled over my campsite. The desert's typical sounds seemed muted. The air felt heavy. I attributed these sensations to weeks of solitude, convincing myself it was just mental fatigue. The next morning changed everything. When I returned to the site, I realized the rocks had moved. Not just slightly. One large column-like stone was tilted at a different angle, while a smaller rock had shifted several feet. No evidence of disturbance existed. No landslide, no tracks, nothing to explain their new positions. I checked my previous day's notes and sketches. They definitively confirmed the rock's movement. Something impossible was happening. I decided to set up a camera to document this bizarre phenomenon. I had a small trail cam in my gear, something I occasionally used to track erosion patterns. That morning, everything changed. I'd mounted the camera on a tripod, aimed it at a cluster of rocks, and set it to capture an image every 10 minutes before returning to my camp. The night was unsettling. A sharp temperature drop accompanied rising winds that howled through the canyons. I couldn't sleep, constantly hearing faint sounds outside my tent, soft scraping and shifting. Each time I checked, nothing was there. When I reviewed the camera footage the next morning, my heart nearly stopped. The photos revealed something impossible. The rocks were moving. Not subtly, but dramatically. In the first frame, they sat in their original positions. The next frame showed them closer together, as if gathering. By the final image, they had arranged themselves into a perfect circle. Approaching the site again went against every instinct screaming at me to leave. A strange vibration filled the air, a low hum just at the edge of hearing. The ground felt warm, almost alive beneath my feet. As I neared the rocks, I froze. Something was watching me. The tallest rock wasn't just a formation. A faint, glowing slit near its top resembled an unblinking alien eye. The hum intensified, resonating in my chest. Suddenly, it wasn't coming from the ground, but from the rocks themselves. They began shifting slowly and deliberately, as if communicating through a series of rhythmic clicks and tones. I felt small, like an insect under a magnifying glass. The rocks observed me, neither advancing nor retreating. Time seemed to stand still. Eventually, I turned and ran, not stopping until I reached my campsite. I packed up frantically, throwing my gear together, desperate to escape whatever I had witnessed. Rocks don't move. Rocks don't form patterns. Yet there it was, undeniable and terrifying. I was at the lake with friends for a weekend getaway. a place I'd always loved for its tranquility and natural beauty. We'd come to relax, escape our daily routines, and enjoy some time together. Saturday afternoon found us lounging by the shore, soaking up the sun and chatting casually. That's when something strange happened. A soft pale blue glow emerged from the water. At first, I thought it was just an unusual light reflection, but as I looked closer, I realized this was different. It wasn't bright or flashy, but definitely noticeable. Jenna was the first to point it out. "Is that normal?" she asked. None of us had ever seen anything like it before. We initially brushed it off as some kind of optical illusion, maybe algae or mineral reactions we didn't understand. After all, we weren't lake experts. Despite the weird glow, we decided to go swimming. The water wasn't cold, and the light was almost hypnotic. When I stepped in, something felt different. The atmosphere seemed to change. The air felt thicker, like taparde. The world was subtly pressing in around us. Oddly, I also felt completely calm. But something wasn't right. Deep down, I knew these weren't just rocks or a trick of light. Something was watching us. I left quickly, jumping in my truck and speeding down the dirt road without hesitation. Miles away, I finally stopped to catch my breath. I told no one, not my colleagues, not my friends. I tried to convince myself it was a hallucination, anything to make it seem less real. Now, late at night, I still hear that faint, distant hum, a memory I can't quite forget, and I haven't been back to that site since. I don't plan to. The water felt different, warm in a way that seemed to radiate from within, not like sunlight heating a pool. As I swam, my body felt weightless, unlike the usual effort and resistance of swimming. It was too easy, as if the water was supporting me effortlessly. Everyone else seemed to experience the same sensation. We floated almost motionless, and the further we went, the more intense the feeling became. Every muscle in my body was completely relaxed, yet my mind remained clear. A strange state between being awake and asleep. It was peaceful, yet unsettling, almost hypnotic. I glanced at Jenna floating beside me. Her eyes were wide, staring blankly at the water's surface. "Are you okay?" I asked. She didn't respond, didn't even seem to hear me. When I shook her shoulder, she blinked slowly, like emerging from a dream. She turned, her expression vacant, and nodded without speaking. An uneasy feeling crept in, though the strange calm persisted. Looking around, I saw everyone was the same, entranced, drifting without care, not swimming or playing as we normally would. Something didn't feel right. Then I noticed the glow. It wasn't just on the surface anymore. Beneath the deeper parts of the lake, the light intensified. Large shapes moved under the water. A low, vibrating hum resonated through the water deep in my chest. It was almost as if the lake was alive, breathing. "Do you guys hear that?" I called out. No response. They continued floating, staring silently at the water. The water seemed to resist every stroke, pulling me back with increasing force. Each movement became more difficult, and the deeper I swam, the stronger the pull became. It felt like something didn't want me to leave. Just beneath the surface, about 10 feet down, I spotted something large and round. At first, it looked like a stone, but as I drew closer, I realized it was something else entirely. Smooth and dark, with faint swirling patterns, it pulsed with a soft glow, almost as if it were alive. Suddenly, I sensed something communicating, not through light or sound, but through the water itself. I could feel a presence in my bones, in my head, trying to speak to me. Then, just as quickly, the calmness shattered. Dread washed over me, and I knew I needed to escape. I called to the others, but they remained motionless, floating and staring blankly at the lake's surface. Swimming back to them was like moving through tar. My arms felt heavy, my legs like lead, but I pushed forward. When I reached the shore, I turned back and saw Jenna sinking. She wasn't floating anymore. The water was pulling her under. I screamed her name, but she didn't respond. Ignoring the strange weight in my chest, I rushed back into the water. Grabbing her arm, I pulled with everything I had. But it was like trying to extract her from quicksand. The water gripped her tightly, drawing her deeper. I couldn't do this alone. I yelled for Mike and Ethan. They snapped out of their trance and rushed over. Together, we pulled Jenna from the water. The moment she was on shore, everything changed. The pull stopped. The lake's glow dimmed. The strange humming faded. We stood there, breathless, staring at the now peaceful water. Something had happened, something we couldn't explain. The lake looked calm, but we knew what we'd experienced was real. We were out patrolling, doing the kind of routine mission you've done so many times it becomes second nature. 6 fighter jets flying in tight formation over open water. The sky crystal clear. Everything felt calm and easy, until it wasn't. At first, nothing seemed wrong. We were cruising at altitude, radios quiet except for occasional check-ins. I was scanning the sky, watching my instruments, listening to the jet's steady hum. Then something shifted. The air felt different. The light changed subtly. I thought it might be my imagination. My instruments started glitching. Small flickers on the radar, altimeter numbers shifting randomly. I tried radioing the others, but only static came through. I could see the other jets close enough to see the pilots, but communication was impossible. The power flickered. My helmet's HUD went black, then returned dimmer. My heart raced, but I stayed focused, running emergency protocols in my head. I still controlled the jet with no engine or maneuverability issues. The other jets began breaking formation, each pilot trying to understand what was happening. That's when I saw it. A distant glint of light, unlike anything I'd ever seen. Not a plane, bird, or drone. Too bright, too precise. Like a star moving closer. Its movement was unnatural, darting, stopping, starting, as if testing something. To this day, I'm not sure what we encountered. Maybe an alien organism, maybe something else entirely. But one thing's certain, I'll never go near that area again. The light caught my attention, growing clearer as it approached. It wasn't just a light, this was something else entirely. A shape emerged, smooth and rounded like liquid metal suspended, in midair. No wings, no engines, nothing that should allow flight. Yet it moved with an unmistakable sense of purpose, alive in a way that defied explanation. Hovering close, I saw my reflection rippling across its surface, like a distorted image in water. The jet controls went dead. I tried the throttle, the stick. Nothing responded. Around me, other jets drifted helplessly, like leaves on a still pond. The object moved between us, slow and deliberate. Each plane seemed to be under its careful examination. My breath caught in my throat. This wasn't from anywhere I knew. Suddenly, one jet attempted to fire a missile. I watched the flash, but something impossible happened. The missile hung frozen in mid-air, as if time itself had stopped. Then it simply dissolved, not exploded, but melted away particle by particle, until only a faint wisp of smoke remained. The response came not with force, but with light. A beam shot skyward, not a weapon, but something more like a signal. Patterns of light and color danced in ways beyond comprehension, shifting and weaving in a language both alien and mesmerizing. We were trained for combat, for emergencies, for survival. This was something else entirely. The object could have destroyed us easily, yet it didn't. It was waiting, observing. With few options left, I managed to trigger our emergency flare system, one of the few controls still functioning. The flare arced into the sky, and the object reacted instantly. Its emitted light shifted to match the flare's color. Then it moved with deliberate precision, positioning itself directly in front of my jet, so close now I could barely breathe. The lights began to pulse, not randomly, but in a pattern that felt intentional. It was communicating, speaking a language I couldn't hear but somehow understood. I was out in the woods, far from any city noise, on a photograph, flight trip I'd been looking forward to for weeks. The national forest was remote, about 2 hours from the nearest town, and I knew the area well. I'd always seen plenty of wildlife here, deer, birds, the occasional fox. Early afternoon, something felt different. The forest was unnaturally quiet. No bird songs, no rustling in the trees, just the sound of my boots on the dirt path and the occasional creak of branches in the wind. When I rounded a bend in the trail, I saw a herd of deer in a small clearing past a dense line of pines. Initially excited about a potential photo opportunity, I started to move closer. Then everything changed. I launched a flare, a different color this time. The object responded, matching the color and pulsing faster. We were communicating somehow. I didn't understand the language, but it was listening. We went back and forth, flare after flare, each answered by the object. It didn't make logical sense, but I could feel something in the patterns. A rhythm, an understanding. This wasn't just light, it was thought, intent. It was alive. Suddenly, it disappeared. The object shot straight up into the sky, faster than anything I'd ever seen, leaving only a faint shimmer where it had been. Our jet controls returned, radios crackled back to life, and we sat in stunned silence. Back at base, we filed reports and went through debriefing. No one could explain what happened, and honestly, none of us were sure we wanted to. Whatever that thing was, it wasn't human. It could have destroyed us, but chose not to. It wanted something else, something we couldn't fully understand. I think about it every day. The way it moved, the way it communicated, the feeling that it was trying to tell us something. I don't know if it'll come back, but if it does, I hope we'll be ready to listen. I noticed something was off with the deer. They weren't moving at all, no grazing, no walking, not even a twitch of an ear. They stood perfectly still, all facing the same direction like frozen statues. Crouching behind a bush, I pulled out my camera and zoomed in. Through the lens, their faces became clearer. Their eyes were wide, but not in a normal way. Something about their gaze made my stomach churn. They looked scared, or maybe entranced, all staring at the same spot deep in the forest. I tried to follow their line of sight, but could only see trees and shadows. They remained motionless, unresponsive. Even the wind seemed unable to disturb them. No ruffling fur, no flicking tails. The scene was deeply unsettling. Curiosity overcame my unease. I set my camera down and slowly approached the clearing. As I drew closer, the air changed. It wasn't cold, exactly, but heavy, like the charged atmosphere before a thunderstorm. My skin began to tingle, and the hairs on my neck stood on end. Stepping into the clearing, I realized the deer hadn't acknowledged my presence. I could have walked right up and touched them, but something held me back. Their unnatural stillness was too strange. Instead, I followed their fixed gaze deeper into the forest. The trees grew denser, and light filtered through branches in odd, fragmented patterns. The tingling intensified. A faint sound emerged, a low, rhythmic hum, just barely audible. As I moved forward, it grew louder. This wasn't like any sound I'd heard before. Not mechanical, not natural, but possessing a strange, unfamiliar cadence. Then I saw it. At first, I thought it was a trick of light. Between the trees, a soft glow appeared, reminiscent of moonlight, but wrong for the time of day. Drawing nearer, I identified its source, a sphere hovering a few feet off the ground, about the size of a beach ball. It wasn't solid in any conventional sense. Its surface rippled and shifted like liquid metal, neither dripping nor flowing. The glow wasn't constant either, but pulsed, growing brighter and dimmer in a mesmerizing organic rhythm. The hum was growing louder, resonating deep in my chest. It wasn't music, but something entirely different, almost like a language I couldn't comprehend. The sphere remained motionless, yet I was certain it was aware of me. Crazy as it sounds, I felt watched, even though no eyes were visible. Around me, the forest had gone completely still. Deer stood frozen, their bodies tense. Birds perched silently on branches, heads turned towards the sphere. A fox crouched low, unmoving. Even a pair of raccoons sat rigid, all fixated on the same spot. None acknowledged my presence, their attention completely absorbed by something I couldn't fully understand. Time seemed to warp. Minutes or hours could have passed. I couldn't tell. The sphere pulsed, and the hum shifted, changing tone and intensity. It felt deliberate, like an attempt at communication. I started feeling lightheaded, sensing I was too close to something beyond my comprehension. Slowly at first, then faster, I backed away. The animals didn't react. They remained transfixed as I retreated. When I reached the clearing where the deer had been, they were gone. The forest felt different, the air lighter, yet an unsettling sensation lingered. I ran until I reached my truck, driving away without looking back. I haven't returned to those woods since. My Air Force days as a radar operator were typically uneventful. Most nights involved sitting in a small room, drinking bad coffee, watching green blips on a screen. But this night was different. At 10:47 p.m., something unusual appeared on my radar. Initially, I suspected equipment interference, a common occurrence. But this was no random glitch. It was a solid contact, moving impossibly fast beyond any known aircraft capabilities. Now, in quiet moments, that distant hum returns, a faint, haunting memory I can't shake, whispering of an encounter I still can't explain. Harris had been doing this longer than me, and I thought he'd explain away what I was seeing. But when I called him over, he just stared at the screen, his mouth tightening like he was trying to solve a puzzle he didn't like. "That's not right," he said finally. "What do you mean?" I asked. He pointed at the screen. "It's jumping." And he was right. 1 second, the object would be in one place, and the next, it would blink out and show up somewhere else entirely. Not a smooth movement, but like it was skipping chunks of space in between. That's not how anything flies. Not planes, not drones, not missiles. We logged it and called it in. Soon, the room wasn't quiet anymore. Higher-ups came in with serious faces, all asking the same questions. What's its heading? What altitude? How fast? The problem was, we couldn't give clear answers. The numbers didn't make sense. 1 second it was moving at speeds that should have melted it into the atmosphere, and the next it was practically hovering. Then it would disappear entirely for a few seconds before showing up miles away. They scrambled a jet to intercept it. I watched the radar as the pilot got closer. The object was still jumping around, but it seemed like it was letting the jet catch up, like it wanted us to see it. Then, as soon as the pilot got within visual range, the thing vanished off my screen entirely. I thought it was gone for good, but then the pilot came over the radio. His voice was shaky, and I could hear his breathing. "It's here," he said. "It's right in front of me." We all listened. The room was dead silent, except for his voice. "It's like nothing I've ever seen. It's shimmering like it's not solid, like it's there and not there at the same time." Then he yelled something I couldn't make out, and his signal went dead. His jet showed up on the radar again, flying back to base. When he landed, they rushed him out of the cockpit like he was sick. A few minutes later, the object came back. This time it was over the base, just sitting there stationary on the radar. Everyone was on edge. You could feel this tight, electric kind of tension in the air. Someone asked if they should scramble more jets, but the commander was watching the screen, his jaw clenched. "Let's see what it does," he said. The night was quiet when I grabbed my telescope and headed to the park. It wasn't a planned trip, just a sudden decision to get away and spend some time under the stars. The weather was perfect, clear and cool enough to be comfortable. I lived close by, so it was just a short walk, and I didn't bother telling anyone where I was going. The park was nearly empty, which suited me fine. A few street lights illuminated the main path, but beyond that, darkness stretched out. I made my way to a hill at the far end of the park that offered a good view of the sky. At the base, something terrifying began to unfold. An object started flickering, disappearing and reappearing, getting closer with each pass. First a mile out, then half a mile, then right over the base. Suddenly, every screen in the room went black without warning. The light stayed on, but all the equipment died. I sat there, heart pounding, certain I might pass out. Harris kept muttering, "This isn't right, this isn't right." Then came a sound I can't properly describe. It wasn't loud exactly, but deeply wrong, like metal bending and glass shattering, but slower, as if underwater. It seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere simultaneously. After what felt like forever, though probably only a minute or two, power returned. The objectivity had vanished. No trace on radar, nothing in the sky. Gone as if it had never existed. Officially, they called it a radar malfunction. That's what we were instructed to say if anyone asked. But we all knew what we'd witnessed, what we'd felt. I transferred out months later. I told myself it was just time for a change, but the truth was simpler. I didn't want to be there if it returned. I didn't want to be waiting, staring at a screen, facing something inexplicable and unfightable. Even now, I think about that night. Especially when a plane flies overhead, I'll wonder for a split second, are they back? Whatever they were, whatever it was, I'll never forget that sound, that deep, wrong sound. Sometimes it echoes in my dreams, and I wake up wondering, what if this wasn't the last time? I headed to a quiet hill with my telescope, a small backpack tucked under my arm. Cricket sounds filled the air, with distant car noises barely registering. My mid-range telescope, nothing fancy but reliable, was soon pointed toward the eastern sky. Stargazing was peaceful. I scanned familiar constellations and planets, enjoying the calm evening. Then something strange caught my eye. Near the horizon, a cluster of stars looked unusual, too perfect to be natural. Their arrangement seemed deliberate, almost geometric. I checked my telescope carefully, adjusting the lens and focus. The grid-like formation remained unchanged. Equal spacing between stars suggested something beyond random celestial positioning. Something felt off, but I couldn't explain what. As I watched, the stars began blinking. Not the typical stellar twinkle, but a precise sequential pattern. One after another, they blinked in what seemed like a deliberate rhythm. Grabbing my notebook, I started recording the sequence. It resembled Morse code, dots and dashes that hinted at communication. Midnight approach, D. The blinking slowed, becoming more regular. An unsettling sensation crept over me, like whatever was creating this pattern knew I was watching. I swept my flashlight across the empty park, half expecting to see someone nearby. Nothing, just wind and darkness. Hours had passed, but I couldn't look away. Something was trying to tell me something, and I was determined to understand. Night fell, and I was gazing through my telescope, adjusting the focus, when something caught my eye. It wasn't just stars anymore. A massive, dark shape loomed beyond the grid, blocking part of the sky. This wasn't a cloud or a shadow. It was solid and moving with deliberate slowness. My hands trembled as I tried to keep the telescope steady. The object was enormous, unlike anything I'd ever seen. Its surface was smooth, almost reflective, with no visible lights or markings. It hovered silently at the atmosphere's edge. The blinking lights seemed to originate from the ship itself, not from the sky. They weren't stars at all. Panic rose in my chest. Something felt deeply wrong. I wanted to run, but my legs wouldn't move. Suddenly, the blinking intensified. The grid shifted, and the lights began forming a pattern. English letters emerged. Help. My mind raced. Help. Help with what? Who needed assistance? Instead of screaming, I grabbed my notebook and started recording the message as it appeared. Word by word, a cryptic communication unfolded. Danger, trapped, escape. The urgency was palpable. Something out there was in trouble, and somehow, inexplicably, it was reaching out to me. A strange mix of fear and responsibility washed over me. I felt chosen, though I didn't understand why. As quickly as it began, the blinking stopped. The light grid faded. The massive ship drifted away, melting into darkness without sound or acceleration. I watched, heart pounding, until the sky was empowered. I sat there for hours processing the incredible scene. The notes in my hand confirmed it wasn't a dream. Walking home, I replayed every moment, haunted by questions. What did it mean? Why me? To this day, I still don't know. We were flying a routine reconnaissance mission over the Bermuda Triangle, nothing out of the ordinary. Command had sent us to investigate reports of strange radar signatures and pilot claims about unusual lights and equipment failures. These incidents usually turned out to be weather-related or instrument malfunctions, but they wanted definitive answers. Our squadron consisted of 5 F-16 pilots, Captain Daniels leading, me as second in command, and 3 other experienced pilots, Carter, Lopez, and Singh. During the first part of our patrol, we were relaxed, joking over the communications system. The sky was clear, stretching endlessly, and the ocean below looked unnaturally smooth, like a giant sheet of glass. About an hour into the flight, things started to get weird. My instruments began acting strangely, with the altimeter and compass flickering uncertainly. I noticed Carter's jet veering slightly, his wing dipping. He reported his controls feeling sluggish. Daniels ordered us to stay in formation and switch to manual control if necessary. Then it happened. A strange light appeared directly ahead, not like a flare or reflection, but a bright, diffused glow that pulsed like a misty cloud. It seemed to have no source, just hovering and growing brighter as we approached. Singh voiced what we were all thinking. Was this thing moving toward us? The light spread across the horizon, seemingly swallowing the sky. Our radios went silent, replaced by a low hum that resonated inside my skull. My jet's controls locked up completely, with no response from the stick or pedals. Since that night, I've returned to the park several times, hoping to see those lights again. But the sky has remained normal, just stars and constellations, nothing unusual. I've considered telling someone, scientists, authorities, anyone, but I'm afraid of sounding crazy. All I have are my notes and the memory of that night. I can't shake the feeling that our encounter wasn't random. It felt deliberate, like a warning or a plea for help. Whatever it was, it's out there somewhere, and I can't stop wondering if it will come back. The world dissolved into an endless white void, my jet no longer responding to any controls. Daniel's distorted voice echoed a warning to eject, but before I could reach the lever, everything changed. The light wasn't blinding, just overwhelming, swallowing the sky and cockpit whole. My stomach churned as if spinning, though nothing confirmed the motion. Suddenly, everything stopped. When the light faded, I wasn't in the sky anymore. The jet rested on something like ground, solid but strange. I popped open the canopy, cool metallic air rushing in as I braced myself. What I saw was nothing like Earth. A dull, greyish-green landscape stretched out, smooth yet uneven like polished stone. Massive geometric structures towered in the distance, pulsing with an ethereal glow. Two enormous moons hung low in a deep purple sky, casting an eerie light across the alien terrain. Our jets were scattered in a rough circle. Daniels was already out, waving us over. We regrouped silently, tension thick in the air. Carter kept glancing nervously at the sky. Singh muttered something about alien abductions, but no one responded. A deep, resonating hum broke the silence, not mechanical, but alive, like an amplified heartbeat coming from everywhere at once. We turned and saw them. 5 beings, roughly our size but elongated, with impossibly long limbs and fluid movements. Their pale, translucent blue skin bore faint glow in G-lines where eyes and mouths might have been. They glided more than walked, barely touching the ground. Instinctively, we raised our sidearms, though it felt futile. Daniel signaled us to stand down as the beings approached. None of us felt okay. Despite our nods to Daniel's check-in, we were somewhere completely unknown, facing something beyond our understanding. Yards away, a being stepped forward, its glowing lines shifting into intricate patterns. Suddenly, a voice resonated in my head, not spoken aloud, but understood perfectly. Daniel lowered his weapon, speaking steadily about being pulled in by the light. The beings exchanged complex patterns, their lines pulsing with an intense rhythm. The air hummed, making coherent thought difficult. Return is possible, the lead being said, but not without cost. You must restore what you have taken. A pool of light appeared, swirling with painful colors. Images flickered within. Our jets, their energy, the disturbance they caused. In that moment, I understood we weren't just intruders, but a genuine threat to this delicate realm. Daniel's face grew grim. Power down the jets, he instructed, completely off. They're feeding off our energy. We scrambled back to our cockpits, shutting down every system, ensuring no power remained active. The being's demeanor shifted. Their glowing lines softened, and the oppressive hum diminished. You may leave, the leader said, but your world is fragile. Its boundaries are not secure. Take care where you tread. Light swallowed us again. When it faded, we were back in the sky, jets functional, as if no time had passed. We returned to base in silence, each wrestling with our extraordinary experience. The official report sanitized everything. A spatial anomaly. Classified top secret. But I know what we saw. Even now, late at night, I sometimes hear that haunting hum, a reminder of a world beyond our understanding. The silence is faint but persistent, leaving me wondering if we truly escaped, or if something followed us back. My flight that day started like countless others before. Pre-flight checks complete, fuel topped off. I took to the sky under a pristine blue canvas that made flying feel effortless. The experimental jet responded perfectly, every system humming smoothly. Around 30,000 feet, things began to shift subtly. First, a quick cockpit light flicker, barely noticeable like a momentary power surge. I checked the gauges, fuel, hydraulics, altitude, all normal. But then it happened again, this time longer. The entire dashboard went dark for several seconds before rebooting. I radioed the base. No response. I switched frequencies. Still nothing. An unsettling silence enveloped me. In the distance, something caught my eye. A glint of light, motionless, not like another aircraft or drone. As I approached, its strange qualities became clearer. This wasn't a metallic object, but something dark and translucent, rippling like oil on water, neither solid nor completely liquid. The jet's engine sputtered. Controls grew sluggish. Panic rose as I realized I was losing power. Throttle pushes yielded nothing. Emergency systems failed. The ejection lever hung uselessly. The air around me changed. Pressure shifted. My ears popped. I was gliding, trapped, drawing closer to this impossible object. My breathing became sharp, hands gripping controls that no longer responded. Something was drawing me in, and I couldn't escape. My jet suddenly stopped mid-air, like it had hit an invisible barrier. A deep vibration pulsed through my chest, not from the engines, but from something else entirely. Everything went dark. When I regained consciousness, I was still in the cockpit, but no longer in the sky. An endless black void surrounded May Bay E. I wasn't hurt, and the jet remained completely intact. This wasn't a crash. Something else was happening. Soft yet blinding light began filling the space from every direction. Shapeless shadows moved without clear origin. The object from before now hovered close above me, its surface covered in strange, shifting patterns that pulsed like a living thing was breathing. A low hum invaded my body, not a sound heard by ears, but felt internally. My skin tingled, my chest tightened. The jet's controls flickered briefly before going dark again. The hum intensified, and the aircraft started to shake violently. I thought I was about to be destroyed, crushed, or torn apart. But then everything stopped. The hum transformed, becoming rhythmic, almost like a signal. It was scanning me, not just the jet, but me specifically. Something was pulling at my mind, extracting memories and images I didn't even know I was thinking. I tried resisting, but it was overwhelming. Whatever it was, it wanted everything. Suddenly, blinding light filled the cockpit. When I opened my eyes, I was back in the sky. The engine roared normally. Gauges showed nothing unusual, and the radio was active. I contacted base, who asked why I'd gone off course and hadn't responded to their calls. I couldn't explain what had happened. They wouldn't have believed me anyway, so I claimed a systems failure and returned to base. Ground crew swarmed the jet, checking for damage. They found nothing, not even a scratch. But I knew what I'd experienced was real. Despite trying to rationalize it as a malfunction or hallucination, something profound had occurred. Deep in a forest untouched for centuries, I was working a routine job cataloging species and taking soil samples. The ecosystem felt alive in a way most places didn't. My work wasn't glamorous, but I loved the solitude. One tree caught my attention immediately. It was enormous, with a trunk wide enough to fit a small car. Thick, gnarled bark, covered in moss and fungi, spread out like a massive network of roots. Some disappeared into the soil, others twisted above ground like muscular veins. This tree felt different. It had a presence, almost like it was watching everything around it. While setting up my equipment, I felt a faint vibration under my feet. At first, I thought it might be something normal. Wind shifting branches, or underground animal movement, but the air was completely still, and these vibrations weren't random. They had a rhythm, soft but steady, almost like a heartbeat. Crouching down, I pressed my palm to an exposed root. The vibration was stronger there, layered with multiple overlapping rhythms. I'd never experienced anything like it. I tried to rationalize it as a natural phenomenon, maybe water moving underground or seismic activity, but something didn't feel right. I spent hours around the tree, documenting everything. Soil samples, phone recordings, even a basic seismometer revealed strange patterns. These readings didn't match any geological data and seemed to originate from far beneath the roots. Curiosity drove me to dig. With just a small trowel, I started excavating. The soil was dense and packed with roots, making progress slow. As I went deeper, the vibrations intensified, making my fingers tingle. Something told me I was uncovering something I wasn't meant to find. About a foot down, I hit something solid. It wasn't a rock. The surface was smooth, cold, and metallic. And deep down, I know it wasn't from here. Whatever it was, it's still out there, watching. The metal was unlike anything I'd encountered before, with a subtle luminescence that seemed to glow without an actual light source. As I cleared away more soil, a massive rounded surface emerged, curving deep into the ghost, round far too large for me to uncover alone. My chest tightened, breath caught in my throat. Constant vibrations thrummed through the metal, pulsing into my body. It felt alive, not like an organism, but like a sentient machine aware of my presence. Despite my hesitation, I found myself drawn to touch it. The moment my palm pressed against the surface, everything stopped. The forest fell silent. No wind, no birds, no leaf rustling. It was as if the world had been suspended in a single moment. Then came a sensation, not a vibration, but something brushing against my mind. Not words or images, just an overwhelming sense of being observed. I pulled back, heart racing, but the feeling lingered. My instincts screamed to flee, yet logic demanded documentation. I set up my camera, pointing it at the excavated hole, and began recording my observations. The vibrations shifted, growing faster and more intense. The ground hummed beneath me, and then the tree responded. Its massive roots creaked and moved, deliberately shifting to expose more of the metallic surface. This wasn't random movement. It felt coordinated, as if the tree and the buried object were working in unison. A faint glow began to pulse, spreading across the ground in an intricate web of light. Beautiful and terrifying, it seemed to represent something far beyond human comprehension. The presence returned, stronger now, no longer just observing but attempting communication. Vibrations transformed into patterns, a message with structure, like a complex code. I frantically documented the sequences in my notebook. A strange clarity washed over me, my thoughts feeling guided. The message transcended language, conveying ideas and concepts just beyond my full understanding. Then, as suddenly as it began, everything stopped. The glow faded, vibrations ceased, and the forest erupted back into life. I'd been tracking this rare migratory flock for over a week, a species that only passes through the region once a year. Years ago, I'd glimpsed them briefly, but never in such numbers. Their roosting site was deep in a remote part of the reserve, miles from any roads or trails. Getting there took me 2 grueling days of hiking with my gear and a small tent. Their feathers caught sunlight in an almost shimmering way, and their calls were sharp and high-pitched, unlike anything I'd ever heard. Each morning, I'd set up camp near the clearing's edge, watching them take off in a synchronized burst, hundreds moving as a single living organism. It was mesmerizing. That particular morning started quietly. The air was cool, the sky a pale gray, and the forest was just beginning to wake. With my binoculars ready, I waited for the flock to stir. When they did, it was abrupt, like someone had flipped a switch. One moment they were still, the next they were airborne, rising in a massive, twisting spiral above the clearing. Just as I was about to grab my camera, something felt off. Their movement was different. Instead of spreading out toward the river, they were climbing higher, circling tighter and tighter, as if being pulled toward an unseen force. Initially, I thought it might be a predator, but then I saw it, a hovering object just above the treetops, so motionless it almost blended into the clouds. As night fell, the experience haunted me. I didn't sleep, instead poring over the patterns I'd recorded. They matched no known code or language, yet they felt deliberate, intelligent. The tree nearby seemed more than just a plant. It was part of something much larger, connected to whatever lay buried beneath. When morning came, I packed my gear and left. I told no one. Part of me knew they wouldn't believe me, but a deeper instinct wanted to protect whatever this was. It felt ancient, older than the forest, perhaps older than humanity itself, and somehow it was still watching. The metal surface remained, now inert, as if whatever had been active had suddenly gone dormant. Birds chirped, leaves rustled, and the tree was just a tree again. The morning was quiet, with only the usual forest sounds filling the air. I was out early, binoculars in hand, tracking a rare bird flock spiraling through the sky. That's when I saw it, something unlike anything I'd ever encountered before. It hovered motionless, roughly the size of a small car, with a dull metallic grey surface that seemed to subtly shift whenever I tried to focus directly on it. No lights, no sound, no visible means of suspension, just suspended there, as if it had always been part of the sky. One by one, the birds broke from their spiral formation and flew straight towards this strange object. Through my binoculars, I watched them vanish into its surface without any impact or reaction from the craft. They simply disappeared, absorbed like they were being swallowed whole. The sight was deeply unsettling, churning my stomach, yet I couldn't look away. I tried rationalizing what I was seeing, perhaps an atmospheric anomaly or unusual cloud formation. But deep down, I knew this was something else entirely. The bird's unnatural movement, the object's faint pulsing, it felt almost alive. Frozen in place, I was paralyzed by fear and fascination. Moving seemed impossible. Running or grabbing my camera felt wrong, like any action might draw unwanted attention. So I remained still, watching the last birds disappear. Then, as suddenly as it appeared, the object began to rise. Its ascent was impossibly smooth, climbing higher until it became nothing more than a distant speck, then vanishing completely into the clouds. The forest fell silent. No bird calls, no wind, no movement. I stood there for what had seemed like hours, my mind struggling to comprehend what I'd witnessed. Eventually, I packed my gear and hiked back to the ranger station, never looking back. I considered reporting what I'd seen, but knew no one would believe me. Who would accept a story about a mysterious craft absorbing an entire bird flock? They'd think I was crazy or lying. So I kept silent, haunted by the memory. Even now, late at night, I can still hear those sharp high bird calls. And sometimes, I wonder where they are, wherever that thing took them. We were on a routine mission, carrying 2 satellites meant to enhance surveillance capabilities. Our task was straightforward: reach the right altitude, release the satellites into orbit, and monitor their initial stabilization. Nothing we hadn't done dozens of times before. The launch went smoothly, no anomalies. We reached orbit without incident, and the Earth curved below us in shades of blue and green. Weightlessness felt familiar, almost comforting now. I was running diagnostics on the first satellite when the signal came through. At first, I thought it was interference. Space isn't silent like people imagine. There's always background noise. But this wasn't static or a garbled transmission. It was rhythmic, almost musical, with a repeating pattern that immediately caught our attention. Captain Reeves reacted first. He ordered us to triangulate the source while reporting the anomaly to ground control. The signal wasn't from Earth or any known satellite. It was faint but persistent, originating just beyond our planned trajectory. Reeves decided to investigate. The shuttle had enough fuel for minor course adjustments, and our mission clock had room to spare. Ground control seemed hesitant but didn't object. They wanted answers as much as we did. As we adjusted course and followed the signal, the source became clearer. It was an back roughly the size of a small aircraft, tumbling slowly through the blackness. Clearly not one of ours. Its surface was dark, almost organic, with no visible seams or panels. We got as close as we dared. The object wasn't emitting heat or showing up on radar. It just hung there, suspended in orbit like a dead thing, but the signal continued to pulse steadily. Reeves decided we needed a closer look. Since the shuttle wasn't equipped for docking, we prepared for an EVA. I volunteered alongside Martina, our payload specialist. We suited up, triple-checked everything, and stepped into the airlock. Floating toward the object was surreal. The closer we got, the more alien it appeared. Its surface wasn't smooth, but covered in intricate patterns that seemed to shift under the light. Martinez reached out to touch it, and that's when everything changed. The object reacted, lighting up not with conventional lights, but with an inexplicable energy. The shuttle drifted silently through the void when the patterns on its surface began to move, glowing faintly. A low hum filled the space, vibrating through our suits. The signal we'd been following grew louder, almost deafening. Before we could retreat, the shuttle systems went haywire. Lights inside flickered and engines powered down. Panic crept into Reeves's voice as he tried to regain control. Martinez and I scrambled, but the object had other plans. A beam of light, if you could call it light, reached out, connecting with the shuttle. Not solid, more like a stream of particles, but with undeniable force. The shuttle was caught in its grip, slowly pulled toward the object. Reeves shouted for us to get inside, but the airlock wouldn't open. Systems were completely unresponsive. We clung to the hull, helpless as the object drew us closer. Lights returned briefly, with strange shadows dancing across the walls. Then I hear a voice, not over the cowls, not in my ears, but in my head. It wasn't speaking words, yet I understood. The realization hit me hard. This wasn't a weapon or a trap. It was a vessel, damaged and stranded, caught in Earth's gravity, unable to escape. The signal we'd followed was a distress call, and now it was feeding off our systems to sustain itself. Martinez and I forced the airlock open manually. Reeves looked pale, gripping the controls like he could will them back to life. The shuttle was being drained, its power redirected to the object. Something compelled me to speak out loud. I told it we couldn't survive without power, that we would help if it let us go. The hum softened, almost listening. The shuttle jolted, the beam disconnected, and the object drifted away, its glow dimming. Our systems rebooted one by one. Engines roared back to life. Reeves didn't wait for ground control's approval. He fired the thrusters and got us out of there fast. Back on Earth, we were debriefed for hours. The official report called it an encounter with unknown space debris, but we knew better. The object wasn't debris. It was alive in its own way, and it had been desperate. I still think about that voice, the way it felt in my head. Whatever it was, it didn't mean us harm. It just needed help. We were the only ones who could help it, and for a moment, survival was all that mattered. That day started like any other test mission routine. Nothing out of the ordinary. I was piloting a new stealth jet, the kind of aircraft they keep hidden in underground hangars, brought out only when absolutely certain no one's watching. After months of training, I knew this aircraft inside and out, or so I thought. We were cruising at 4,000 feet over the Nevada desert, skies crystal clear, visibility perfect. I'd completed dozens of similar runs, testing the jet's evasive capabilities and gathering data for ground engineers. Then, everything changed. At first, I dismissed it as a shadow, a trick of light. But shadows don't hover. Off my left wing, a dark, smooth shape hung motionless about the size of a car, but unlike any drone or aircraft I'd ever encountered. No lights, no markings, nothing. Control, this is Alpha 2. I've got a visual on an unidentified object, bearing 200-7,500 yards. Silence. Control, it's a bogey, matching my altitude and speed. Another pause. Alpha 2, maintain visual. Stand by for instructions. I watched, expecting it to veer or accelerate. Instead, it remained almost casual, as if studying me. Suddenly, my radar erupted. Alerts flashed, but nothing made sense. The system couldn't lock onto something that, according to instruments, wasn't even there. Then it moved, impossibly fast. 1 second beside my wing, the next directly blocking my flight path. I pulled up hard, banking left, stomach lurching with G-forces. But it remained perfectly aligned with my nose. I rolled right, diving desperately to escape. The jet's system screamed warnings, but I didn't care. I just wanted away. Yet no matter what I did, it mirrored me, not following, anticipating. Every turn, every roll, every dive, it was already there, waiting. I felt trapped, like a mouse with every escape route blocked, before I could even consider it. It wasn't reacting, it was predicting. I was flying, pushing my jet to its limits, when something locked onto me. No evasion options. My voice cracked with panic as I shouted at Alpha 2 to disengage and return to base. This thing knew my moves before I did. Instinct took over. I started throwing the jet into wild, unpredictable patterns. Zigzags, random flips, anything to break its rhythm. The jet groaned under the strain. Frame stretched to breaking point. Sweat poured down my face. Hands aching from grip. Ping the controls so tightly. For a split second it worked. The shadow vanished. Relief flooded through me, but only momentarily. Seconds later, it reappeared above me, perfectly aligned, almost mocking my efforts. That's when I realized this wasn't a chase. It could have taken me down at any moment. Instead, it was testing me, just as I'd been testing the jet. I was the subject of an experiment, and I didn't like where it was heading. My communications went dead. No radar, no navigation, not even basic altitude readings. Cockpit lights flickered, and the engine whined under an unknown strain. The object pulsed, a ripple of light running across its surface. No longer just a shadow, it shimmered, translucent, like liquid glass. A pressure built in my head, a low hum that wasn't a sound but something deeper. My teeth ached. Desperate, I spoke out loud, "I don't know what you want, but I'm not your enemy." The hum stopped instantly. The pressure vanished. The object moved again, circling me lazily before pulling ahead and stopping directly in my path. It hung there for a moment, then shot straight up, disappearing faster than I could blink. My systems flooded back to life. Lights, sounds, controls voice shouting in my ear, all at once, overwhelming. But I was transfixed by the empty sky where the object had been. Hours of debriefing followed. They asked the same questions repeatedly. What did it look like? How did it move? Did it attack? I told them everything, but I could tell they didn't believe me. I was on a routine patrol over a mostly uninhabited stretch of coastline, the kind of flight you could practically do in your sleep. The weather forecast promised clear skies, but a bank of heavy clouds rolled in unexpectedly. No big deal, I thought. I've flown through worse. At 10,000 feet, I entered the cloud. It was thick, like flying through a solid wall. I couldn't even see my own aircraft's wings. My instruments worked fine, but there was this strange static in my headset. Faint, but definitely there. Probably just moisture or electronic interference, I told myself. Clouds do that sometimes. Halfway through, the static changed. It wasn't random anymore. It sounded rhythmic, almost like clicking. Before I could figure out what was happening, I broke through the other side. Sunlight hit me like a spotlight, and everything seemed normal again. I took a breath and checked my controls. Everything looked fine. Then I glanced at my wings, a habit after flying through rough weather. That's when I saw it. Something was attached to the right wing near the tip. At first I thought it was debris, maybe a torn weather balloon or a piece of plastic. But it wasn't moving like something caught in the wind. Long, translucent tendrils wrapped around the wing's edge like fingers. The main body was almost transparent, with faint blue and purple veins pulsing slowly, as if it were alive. It reminded me of a jellyfish. I tried to shake it off. I dipped the wing, jerked the stick back and forth, even climbed thousands of feet to see if the pressure change would dislodge it. Nothing worked. It just held on, its tendrils tightening slightly, almost like it understood my attempts. My heart was racing. I called back to base control. Echo 1, I've got something on my wing. Now, I know what people said. They chalked it up to equipment failure and pilot error, but I know what I saw. That thing wasn't human. It wasn't from here. Whatever it was smarter, faster, and more advanced than anything we've ever put in the sky. I still fly, but now I keep one eye on the horizon. I don't think it's coming back for me. But if it does, I'm not sure I'll be lucky enough to outfly it again. I tried to communicate with the biological entitlement, but static obscured the transmission. I caught enough to realize they didn't comprehend my message. Repeat requests went unanswered, and communication deteriorated. The thing on my wing began moving. Slowly, but definitely moving. Its body rippled like breathing, tendrils unwrapping and stretching along the wing's surface. I considered climbing higher, hoping the cold might neutralize it, but something felt wrong about ascending with this unknown presence. I started a careful descent, wanting to return to base quickly. Suddenly, My instruments went completely haywire. The altimeter spun wildly, the compass needle jerked erratically, and the speed gauge flatlined. I lost all sense of orientation. Even backup systems failed. The static in my headset intensified, now more than just clicks. A deep hum or growl emerged beneath the noise. Then I saw it, a distant light pulsing against the bright sky. Initially, I thought it might be another aircraft, but its movement was too deliberate, too steady. It was approaching. The wing-attached entity pulsed faster. Its tendrils stretched further, now glowing faintly in blue and purple, the same colors as its internal veins. This wasn't just a parasite, it was a beacon. The distant light grew brighter, closer. A massive oval craft emerged, black and smooth as obsidian. It moved silently, defying every aerodynamic principle I knew. Panic set in. I slammed the throttle forward, pushing my plane to its absolute limits. The entity tightened its grip, almost clinging desperately. The headset's clicking transformed into an unbearable high-pitched screech. I ripped off the headset and discarded it. The craft was right behind me now, filling my entire rear view. It made no aggressive moves, simply following and matching every maneuver with unnerving precision. It was studying me, toying with me. I knew escape was impossible. The only option was addressing the thing on my wing. I remembered the emergency flares. Not much, but they burned intensely hot. I was on a standard cargo route with Anders and Davis, nothing out of the ordinary. Just another night flying over the ocean, hauling equipment to the base. The hold was packed tight with crates, mostly spare parts and some sealed military containers. We never asked too many questions about these jobs. Hours into the smooth flight, with clear weather and good instruments, things were quiet, except for the engine's steady hum. Anders had just started talking about his old training days when Davis's voice crackled over the intercom. "You guys hear that?" he said. I asked what he meant. "Thought I heard something moving back here," he added, sounding unsure. "Probably just pressure playing tricks," we figured. Anders suggested double-checking the cargo straps. A few minutes later, Davis called again, this time with more urgency. "I'm telling you, there's something moving back here. I'm checking it out." Suddenly, everything changed. I popped the canopy just enough to launch a flare. Wind hammered my face, freezing and deafening. I aimed the launcher at the wing and fired. A bright, angry red streak shot out, hitting near where something was gripping the wing. The reaction was instant. A jellyfish-like creature erupted in a blinding white light, its veins blazing. Its tendrils retracted, and it drifted away, falling into the darkness. The pulsing stopped. The clicking in my headset went silent. My instrument snapped back to life as if nothing had happened. Behind me, the craft slowed, hovering momentarily before turning and vanishing into the horizon. I didn't wait around. I dove straight for the base, radioing in as soon as I could. When I landed, the mechanics found scorch marks on the wing where the thing had been. No other damage. No again of the creature. I still don't know what it was or why it was there. But I know it wasn't random. It was waiting for something, or someone. And whatever it was signaling to is still out there. I glanced at Anders as I put the plane on autopilot. Something felt off. Davis should have checked in by now. 5 minutes passed, then 10. Nothing. I called over the intercom. "Davis, you good back there?" Silence. I motioned for Anders to stay put and headed to the cargo hold. The space was dimly lit, overhead lights casting a cold, pale glow. The air felt heavy, pressing down on me. Moving slowly between the crates, I called Davis's name. No response. Halfway down, I spotted his flashlight on the floor, its beam pointing at nothing. My chest tightened. As I bent to pick it up, a faint, wet sound caught my attention, like something sticky being peeled off a surface. It came from behind a large, bolted-down container. I swept the flashlight toward the noise. Something moved, quick and fluid, like a solid shadow. It slipped away before I could focus. Heart pounding, I forced myself closer. Turning the corner, I found Davis. He was slumped against the container, eyes open but not seeing. His face was frozen in pure terror. I dropped to my knees, shaking him. He was breathing, shallow and fast, but unresponsive, locked inside himself. The wet peeling noise returned, closer now, almost behind me. I whirled around, flashlight wild. It was crouched low in the shadows, slick and dark, almost oily, shimmering faintly. Dog-sized, but with a shape that defied logic, sharp angles and smooth curves that shouldn't exist together. Its eyes were two unblinking, glowing slits. It didn't move, just stared, waiting. I couldn't look away. My legs felt like lead, my brain screaming to run, but my body refusing to listen. Then it hummed, a low vibration I felt in my chest more than a Hesh eared. The lights flickered. The noise was doing something to the plane, though I couldn't explain how. Somehow I found the strength to stand and back away slowly, keeping my flashlight trained on it. It didn't follow me, just stayed there watching. When I reached the intercom, I grabbed it and shouted for Anders to get back immediately. He didn't argue. A minute later, he appeared at the edge of the hold, his face going pale when he saw Davis and the thing. "What the hell is that?" he whispered. "I don't know," I said, "but it's not from here." We didn't have time to figure out what to do. The hum grew louder, and the plane started to shudder. Alarms blared in the cockpit as something messed with the electronics. Anders ran back to stabilize us, leaving me alone with the creature. It began to move, slowly unfolding itself as if it had been cramped up for too long. Its body shifted and stretched, almost like it was deciding what shape to take. Instead of approaching me, it turned its attention to one of the sealed containers, reaching out cautiously with its tendrils or arms. That's when I understood. It wasn't just hiding in the cargo hold. It was running from something, and whatever it was looking for was inside that container. The plane jolted violently, knocking me off my feet. The creature froze, its glowing slits narrowing. I scrambled back, shouting for Anders, but he didn't answer. The alarms grew louder as the plane struggled to stay in the air. The creature turned back to me. For a moment I thought it would attack, but instead it backed away, retreating into the shadows. The hum stopped, and the plane steadied. Anders finally regained control, and we made an emergency landing at the nearest base. When the crew came to inspect the cargo hold, the creature was gone. Davis was alive but unresponsive, and the sealed container had been opened. Whatever tech was inside was missing. The military took over from there, telling us nothing except that we weren't to speak of it. Davis eventually recovered but never talked about what he saw. I still don't know what that thing was or what it wanted, but I know one thing. It wasn't here by accident. Something dangerous lurks in the shadows, unseen but definitely present. An unknown threat pursues, driving something or someone to flee in desperate panic. Whatever is running knows the threat is real, and the hunter remains close behind, waiting. The chase continues, with no clear resolution in sight, just a raw sense of primal fear and survival instinct driving movement through darkness.